Hello. Welcome.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to the world from Grandma's Attic.
This is the second episode.
Yeah.
I'm glad you are joining us. Maybe a few more of you this time than last time.
Yeah.
Maybe we can build a little bit. That'd be good.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like it. I might be saying that too early. I don't remember.
Doesn't matter, because even if you don't like it, you should still like and subscribe it.
Yeah, or
just for
comment
fun.
and tell us how bad it is.
Yes.
That's also engagement.
Or if we really infuriate you, which
Yeah.
we might.
We might. I mean, I infuriate myself sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely let us know how much you hate us.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, within reason. Don't be a jerk to other people, though.
Yeah, you can direct your ire at us, and as long as you're not threatening to kill my family, we're good.
Yeah, but that should be enough.
Yeah, that should be an obvious one. Yeah.
But so today, as you know, and hopefully when you see this, it will be the case as well. It is June, and many of the Western governments throughout the world have decided that June is a month to celebrate Pride.
We're recording this in June. You will be watching it in July. FYI.
Right. True. We're recording this in June. Anyway, the point is, a lot of governments have decided that that's a time to celebrate Pride. And today's topic is religion and theology, something in between those. And I thought it would be fun to go through a variety of religions from throughout history and see what the people in those religions have to say about Pride, since it's a month of apparently celebrating it.
Yeah. Pride is a good thing now, apparently.
Yeah.
Let's see what religions have to say about that. Okay.
So I'm gonna read the quotes and I'm gonna tell you who said it.
Okay.
If you want to try to guess who it's from,
I'll try to guess.
I'll try to guess the religion. Just don't look at my screen.
I won't look at your screen.
So
I can't read it from
some of
far
these
away
will be
anyway.
super easy for you.
Okay.
So, first one: when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom.
That's obviously Proverbs.
Yes.
Obviously Proverbs. It's a great one.
Yeah. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted.
That also sounds like Proverbs.
It does. This one's not a proverb, but it is from the Bible, so you're close.
Is that Jesus?
I don't remember if it was Jesus, because I didn't have the red text version and I was in a hurry.
Okay.
But it's Luke 14:11 for anyone
Luke
that wants to
14:11,
look it up.
probably
Anyone that wants
Jesus.
to look it up.
Okay.
And then one more from the Bible. There are a bunch in the Bible, but we're just going to stop at 3 because, time is a thing.
Because we like the Bible. It's our favorite of the religions.
Yes,
Just FYI.
we are Christian.
Yeah.
But I'm not limiting this in case you couldn't tell. Yeah. We are Christian, but I am not, when it comes to this, I'm not going to exclude other religions. We've got a lot of religions weighing in on this topic.
Okay, good.
The next one is, do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited.
See, I want to say that also. You know what? I'm going to say that's Paul who wrote that.
I believe you're right. Yep. Romans 12:16.
Oh, nailed that.
Good job. Okay. So now we've got some that are, these are not straight out of the Bible.
Okay.
So, it was pride that changed angels into devils. It is humility that makes men as angels.
Oh, I want to say that's...
I will say, I have no super obscure references.
Okay, so is this like...
At least not that I'm...
Yeah. So is it... This is obviously Christian.
Okay.
Is it Catholic or Protestant?
You're supposed to guess.
Oh, okay. I'm going to guess it's a Catholic theologian. You know what? This is Thomas Aquinas.
Close. St. Augustine.
Dang, okay, I was close. They're similar.
Yeah. They agreed on a lot of stuff.
Yes, they did.
Next one. Pride is the beginning of all sin, because it perverts man's nature into seeking his own glory instead of the glory of God.
I'm going to call this one Aquinas.
Yep.
Yeah,
you are
okay.
correct.
All right,
this one's from, the first one from St. Augustine was from City of God, assuming my references are correct. And this one's St. August Aquinas, Summa Theologica.
Okay.
Excuse me. So now we've got some other ones. These might be harder to guess.
Okay.
But they are all, at least according to what I know, feel free to correct me in the comments. I am always happy to be informed of different truths than I know. But as far as I know, all these people are pretty big within their branch of religion.
Okay.
This one, the real work is in the heart. Here, pride is cut down, not simply in words, but from the thoughts themselves.
I like that quote a lot. I have no earthly idea who said it. I've never heard
I didn't think you would. So I'm gonna make you guess a little bit because I've got a couple more from the same branch.
Okay.
Pride makes us forgetful of our sins and careless in our prayers.
I like that too. Again,
I wouldn't have been able to guess these either. And then pride leads to the ruin of the soul by its own hand. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. These all sound like old writers. Is this like shoot, I don't know any old.
Or a hint, if you want a hint, we have already covered the Bible. We've already covered Catholicism.
Okay, so these are going to be
different.
Martin Luther.
Not quite, although I'm sure there's Martin Luther in here somewhere.
Okay.
These are all quotes from Eastern Orthodox people.
Oh, I don't know that I know a single theologian from Eastern Orthodox.
I didn't either until I was doing this. Okay. It's very interesting. I
so
like.
Who are these people?
Yeah, so this one is John Chrysostom.
I've never.
This is in Homilies on Matthew.
Okay.
And he is one. If I'm not mistaken, he's one of the maybe founder is the wrong word. He's one of the big. He's like their St. Augustine, I think. Kind of.
Oh, okay.
That's how it seemed to me from research. Again, let me know in the comments if you happen to be Eastern Orthodox or know a lot about it. I'm not super familiar with it.
Neither am I.
The second one was Gregory Palamas. I don't know how he would pronounce it.
You know, that sounds vaguely familiar. I'll bet you he was in the Byzantine era.
Very possibly. It's from Triads in Defense of the Holy Hesychasts. Don't know what that is.
That sounds very above my pay grade.
yeah, I'm with you. And the last one was from Maximus the Confessor, which I'm like,
Maximus the Confessor. What a name! What a name! That's a dude. Right that is a man. I love that. Okay, Maximus the Confessor.
Yeah, from That's 400 great. Chapters on love.
Ooh, okay.
That's a lot of chapters.
Dude, he is prolific.
Yes.
Okay. Good for you, Orthodox guys out there. Good for you.
Yeah, honestly, like the more I learn about
I respect the Orthodox guys a lot. I really do.
They seem cool. They seem legit. Unfortunately, they would consider us completely non-Christian.
They would probably think we're heretics who are going.
Yes, because I think they believe they are the.
Maybe we'll get to that later. Actually,
yeah, that could be an interesting
because you guys don't know our exact beliefs, so we'll see.
We'll probably talk about something about that, but more about pride right now, because again, this is a month dedicated to pride, so we need to talk about it. Pride is the mother of all heresies and the foundation of all sin.
Okay, so we've gone through Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. This is Protestants now. So it's going to be either John Calvin or Martin Luther. Let's go with Martin Luther.
Yep.
Nailed it. Okay. All right.
Pride makes us artificial and humility makes us real.
John Calvin.
No, actually.
Okay,
although,
I thought it was,
at least not as far as I know. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's a good one. You skipped a lot of time in between.
I did.
Okay,
yeah, these are not necessarily in chronological order.
I was trying to game the system a little bit.
These are in the order I found them in.
Okay.
Because I basically am just looking up quotes and reading through like segments of their writings and stuff like that. So, pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind.
C.S. Lewis?
No, that one's actually John Calvin.
Dang off!
I was like, well, Calvin, okay. I'm not Presbyterian. I have a lot of friends.
Neither am I, but hey, Calvin actually said a lot of really good stuff that wasn't about predestination. Spoiler alert, neither of us believe that whole predestination.
There's an asterisk there.
There is an asterisk.
Okay. At the risk of derailing this.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and start already.
I believe that we 100% have free will.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Me too.
I also believe that predestination, ignoring all religion, if there is no God, there is still predestination. Because there is only one path that the universe ever will take. The atoms and molecules and electrical signals and background radiation are all in a specific configuration that necessitates they go to another configuration afterwards.
But that doesn't mean that there is a mind that made it happen that way. All you're really saying...
Well, if the universe is deterministic in that from a specific starting state, it is guaranteed to go to a next state after that, then the mind that creates the universe is also the mind that decides everything that'll ever happen.
But see, I don't know that I subscribe to the sort of, you might call it chemical determinism, like the Sam Harris.
And for me, it's not just chemical. It's also a metaphysical thing. So we can talk. We
might have to get into that later.
We'll dive into that later. I want to finish the quotes about pride, because we've hardly even gotten through half the religions in the world. We've just gotten through part of Christianity.
Right. Okay. So we've got John Calvin and Martin Luther and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. All right. Keep going. There's got to be.
Okay. This is a new branch of Christianity. Okay. It was pride that cast Lucifer out of heaven, and it's pride that keeps him out.
Chesterton? No, he's Catholic. He said a new branch.
Mm-hmm. This one surprised me, for what it's worth. Because it's another one I don't know much about.
Okay, well, then that rules out Lewis, because it kind of sounds like a Lewis thing. Let me go with Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon.
What branch is he from?
Baptist.
Baptist? No.
I think.
This is not Baptist, although that's That's good to know. This is John Wesley.
Wesley. He was the other guy I was thinking
Anglican, apparently. From all I could find, he was Anglican. Unless I'm crazy.
of. I don't think John Wesley.
If
well, no.
I have
Wesley
him-
was Wesley.
Wait, no. Is this
Right?
okay. I have it as. Feel free to let me know in the comments how wrong I am on this. This was
we
very
might both
quick
be
research.
very wrong.
I did not have a lot of time for this specific part. But I have this as John Wesley from Sermons on Several Occasions. Sermon 16,
Okay.
The Means of Grace, Section 2, Paragraph 3.
Okay.
How true that is, I don't know. I didn't have time to double and triple check it like I
I
like
think
to.
Wesley was his own thing. Wesleyan.
I mean, he founded,
Wesley.
if it's the same Wesley, then and John Wesley's not exactly a super unique name.
But there's only one famous theologian named John Wesley.
Yeah, it's
right?
entirely possible. Maybe I'm just losing
I don't
my
know, because
mind.
Anglican, the
He
Anglican
came up
Church.
under Anglican for some reason. Okay,
Well,
we're gonna
Google it,
this.
because the
We're gonna
Anglican
Google
Church
this.
was, you might think, founded by Henry VIII, actually.
Yeah,
'Cause-
actually.
So I
Literally, he was like, you know what? The Pope won't let me get divorced. I'm
So-
founding a new church where I
New
can get
church.
divorced. Oh, man.
he really wanted an heir.
Okay, so John Wesley founded Methodism,
Methodism.
but he was originally an
He was an
Anglican
Anglican.
cleric.
Oh, and he
He
kind
was
of,
a cleric, an
split
Anglican
off.
priest who was like, I'll be Methodist instead.
well, I'll do my own thing, which people will call
Yeah,
Methodism.
that's actually, yes,
Okay,
that
okay.
one.
Okay.
Okay, so we're both right.
Yeah, we are.
Actually.
Okay.
That's convenient.
Although I said Wesleyan. Maybe that's just the university, Wesleyan University.
That's like if you're in like seminary or something, then you might call his theologies like Wesleyan theologies.
Oh,
'cause he
kind of
had
like
a lot of
Calvinist
influence.
is not a denomination.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually a really good analogy for it too. So next one, pride is spiritual cancer. It eats up the very possibility of love or contentment or even common sense.
Okay, the use of the word cancer makes me think it's more modern, and also
Hmm.
it's so plain spoken. It's got to be C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's Anglican.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
Anglican.
C.S. Lewis is
What a man.
just so clear with his words. He's impossible not to understand. He's
Yeah.
the most understandable theologian I have ever read.
Yeah. Oh, he's my favorite.
Yeah.
That was from Mere Christianity, by the way.
Okay. Well, that's why it sounded familiar. I've actually read that book.
Yeah, same.
I have also read part of the Summa Theologica.
Dude, we need to have maybe one of our next episodes can just be talking about C.S. Lewis.
There's
There's so
obviously hours and hours and hours
much.
worth of content.
People
for
teach
C.S. Lewis.
entire courses.
Yeah,
on him.
yeah. There's that'd be a good idea.
That'd be
Okay.
fun. Okay, so now we are getting into more interesting ones.
Okay.
We are now outside of Christianity.
Okay. All right.
See if you can guess the religion.
Okay.
You don't have to guess branches in this one. 'Cause-
Okay. Yeah, because
yeah.
I don't even know the branches.
Yeah.
Probably.
So no, no one who has an atom's weight of pride in his heart will enter paradise.
Enter paradise, Islam.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like Islam.
Assuming my references are correct, this is Sahih Muslim, Book 1, Hadith 164.
That means nothing to me.
I know, me either. I'm assuming that's, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I'll bet you he's prominent.
Very
Probably.
possibly. I wouldn't know. Feel free to let us know in the comments. And again, these are people who I tried to find people who were like, at least seem to me like they're pretty prominent in the religion as a whole.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the sects of the different religions, or at least not enough to.
I know a little bit about the difference between Sunnis and Shias
I know a little bit, but
Yeah.
not enough to.
because it was
Yeah.
basically it was just a power struggle between who would. It was the Sunnis and Shias. That division is basically like the War of the Roses. Who succeeds the crown? Is it like this nephew or
Yeah.
this cousin kind of thing? That's
Yeah.
basically the division.
That's about the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, and then the Sunnis, I think, are the ones with the imams, or maybe it's the Shias. One of them has imams, the other doesn't.
I got you. I can't remember.
I can't even. I googled it the other week, and I've already forgotten. So
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Next
Okay. Next, pride leads to self-deception and conceit. Those who succumb to it will never achieve enlightenment. So.
Oh, achieve
there it is.
enlightenment in Hinduism.
Buddhism.
Dang. Okay, I get those two confused all the time.
Understandably,
If
they have a lot of similarities.
if you're in the comments and you follow one of those religions, you'll probably roll your eyes and say, "Yeah, I get that all the time." But
actually, honestly, if you're in the comments and you follow either Hinduism or Buddhism, please
Dude,
describe
comment
for
and-
us what the differences are. 'Cause
I'd
I know
love to
some
see
of
that.
them. I'm relatively familiar, but I don't have a deep knowledge. and
Hindus
certainly not
believe in
firsthand.
a god, at least sometimes. There's a sect of
Gods.
Hinduism. No, there's a sect of Hinduism that's monotheistic.
Oh, I didn't
The only
realize
reason
that.
I know that is because Vivek Ramaswamy explained it. Because when he was running for president, people were like, "You're Hindu, though," and he was like, "But I'm monotheistic." And
That's
that
interesting.
didn't really.
That's
a lot of the
interesting.
Christian right was like, yeah, that's not good enough,
Not
buddy.
the same, buddy. Is your monotheist? Is your monotheos our monotheos?
Yeah, it's not. It's not the same thing. Anyway,
Okay. Okay. So I just realized
so what I'm learning is that I'm terrible at like ascertaining other religions. That's what I'm really
I
learning.
purposely tried to pick some that weren't super obvious.
Okay,
But I tried to also keep it to where it's like in
still
theory,
achievable.
maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, this wasn't originally going to be guessing. It's just more fun when you try to guess.
Well, yeah, it's always more fun.
So the next one: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to those of demonic nature.
Demonic nature. Let's
This one
call
may
that.
surprise you.
Oh nope. Now I'm gonna back up.
Well, I mean, you can still guess. It surprised me.
Hinduism.
This one's Confucianism.
Oh, I was almost gonna say
Were you? Did I mess you up?
Confucianism. No, because when you said that, I was like, maybe this is Zoro, whatever.
Zoroastrianism.
But I was like, do they believe in demons? I don't even know. I don't know anything about what they believe.
Another one from Confucius.
I would not have thought Confucius would have been a demons guy or demonic.
I mean, so I have this, and oh, you know what? Sorry, that is not Confucianism. That one's Hinduism. I put it under the wrong heading.
I was right.
Yeah, that's my bad. Because that one, I think so. Again, correct me in the comments if I'm
I
wrong.
don't think
I think
Confucius believed in demons.
The book is, oh yeah, it's not technically a religion.
Yeah, it's just a guy
Yeah.
who was like,
The guy
here's
who's
my
like,
wisdom.
Here's how you should not be a horrible person.
And then the Chinese government at the time,
was like, yeah.
which was incredibly despotic, was like,
Still
well, yeah, it was just despotic in a different way. They were like, oh, okay, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. We're just going to impose his rules on all of our subjects, and they're going to have to follow him. And if they don't follow him, we'll just kill him.
because that's how the
Yeah.
Chinese government.
Yeah. And that's how it became a religion.
That makes sense. Although
It was adopted by the Chinese government.
I would argue it's still not a religion. They just pretend it is. But
Yeah,
that's
well,
we can
yes,
have that
I
discussion
actually
later.
agree with you there, but
We're getting close to being done with it
okay,
right
okay.
now. The Confucian quote was, "He who is modest in his words and excesses in his actions." That's a weird word, but will have the love of the people. So basically,
See, that
modesty
sounds
is a
like
good thing.
Confucian.
Yeah.
That definitely sounds like
Yeah,
Confucian.
I literally just missed with my headings. Okay, next one. Pride destroys a man just as rust and iron. Oh, sorry, just as the rust does to iron. Pride destroys a man just as the rust does to iron.
Okay, so this is old school. A rusty iron comparison is going to be old school. We haven't done the pagans yet, but would the pagans be this coherent? No, I'll say yeah. Yeah, I'll say it's like I don't know, do I have to define which pagan
Just
Okay, we'll say the pagans.
Okay. I need to know who you're talking about. Who is the pagans? Because actually, pagans, there's a lot of different.
That's why I said do I need to define
Pagans in general.
which
I
do I
don't-
need to try to guess which
So,
pagan branch?
Lumping this
Like, is
under
it the Norse
paganism-
or the Greeks or the
Okay,
Egyptians?
it is none of those.
Okay.
This one's Zoroastrianism. So it's not.
But
it
are
might
they
be
pagan, though?
But it's not one of the pagans you were talking about. It's not
Yeah,
Rome. It's not
yeah.
Greece. It's not the Norse. It's not the Celts. It's not.
What do Zoroastrians
ancient
believe? There's the comment.
Yes. Tell me about.
Challenge
I just
today.
found this quote and I'm like, cool. It's a Zoroastrian guy talking about pride.
Maybe some guy from like India or I don't even know which
I don't
country.
know.
follows
The reference I have for this one is the Zend Avesta, Yasna 31:11.
Sounds kind of Indian, vaguely.
Kind of. I want to say it's more Persian or something. I think
Maybe it is.
Zoroastrianism was named after Zoroastrius from like Persia or something.
Oh,
Which
and
is
so
why they say they're the oldest religion or whatever.
I'll bet you it's been largely stamped out in the modern world by the Islamic people who now rule Persia,
Very possibly.
Iran, which is probably why I have no idea what they believe.
Yeah. Dude, you know what? Maybe our next episode could be like talking about little known religions.
That'd be interesting.
Maybe we could rank them on how awesome they are or something. Oh man. Okay. We got two more quotes. I'm just going to tell you actually I'll read both to you and then you try to guess what belief system they're from.
Okay.
Pride is a matter of deception. When you think you're doing well, it whispers in your ear that you deserve all the praise, and when you're in error, it keeps you blind.
I'll bet you that's like Plato or something.
The second one is pride is an obstacle to wisdom, for it blinds us to our own ignorance.
No, that sounds like Plato. Actually, they both sound like Plato.
You can
Is
just guess the belief system.
it Greek. The Greek.
You're not terribly
The
far
Greek
off.
people.
Stoicism.
That was Greek, right?
I think I'm sure there were Greek Stoics. I associate it more with Romans, mostly because of Marcus Aurelius, who was
I think it was
Marcus
a
Aurelius was the first
Greco-Roman
pope.
thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's Roman, so like basically Greek.
The
right?
Romans are Greek 2.0.
Yeah, they're Greek plus plus.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So I'll call that one a win. I'll call that one a win.
For all of our listeners, all 11 of you at the time of us last checking, I will let you decide, based on all that knowledge from all those belief systems, what you think about Pride Month. So you can decide for yourself.
Is
I
it
think the answer's
good?
pretty clear.
Is it good to
Should we
celebrate
Pride?
Or maybe it comes before a fall, or maybe, just maybe, it will bring self-destruction. That was a pretty big theme. Big theme.
Yes, it was.
So as we review this month, just think about all the self-destructive behavior you've witnessed over the past month.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it. Okay.
Yeah.
What's up next?
Okay. So now we're going to talk about, we're going to focus more on Christianity because we both know more about that.
A lot more about that.
And we're going to talk about the different...
Although I know a decent bit about Islam. Just FYI.
Nice.
I'm not like a complete, like, Stone Age guy. Like, I read some books.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we are specifically going to be talking about the different denominations.
Okay.
And ranking them.
Okay.
Specifically, we're going to be giving them...
It's like a tier list?
Kind of, yeah. So
Okay.
that was actually the initial intent, but I think this will be more fun. I actually have a bunch of quotes from certain denominations.
Okay.
The ones I could easily find quotes from the people who founded the denomination.
Okay.
Or at least who were instrumental.
Well, that's not fair to
in
the
founding.
Catholics, because they're going to say Jesus founded.
Okay, I have a list.
Jesus founded all of our denominations.
So real quick, I have a list of all the denominations, we'll say all the branches of Christianity.
Okay.
I have a list of them with their founder, and just as they claim. And I want you to know, the Catholic Church, my notes literally say the Catholic Church, founded by Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I thought that might be a fun thing to talk about.
Yeah,
Eventually.
I've got a lot of opinions on that.
So,
all love to the Catholics out there. I actually do, not to give a spoiler alert, I like the Catholics, but...
Yeah. I mean, the Catholics is really not one group of people, if I'm being honest.
It's true.
It's such a huge group that they marginally share certain beliefs in common.
But there's a lot of backslidden Catholics, the same way there's a lot of backslidden Baptists.
I'm not saying they're more or less Christian than anyone else.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that my like of a Catholic is not based on whether they call
I don't.
themselves
Let
Catholic.
me put it this way. I tend to agree with Catholics more than some of even the Protestant denominations. There are some Protestant denominations that I disagree with more than the Catholics.
Well, that's probably true for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me some quotes.
Okay. Well, yeah. So these are we're gonna skip Catholic because they just cheat and say they were founded by Jesus.
Okay,
Which
okay,
I'm gonna just
but
go ahead and straight up say, I do not.
They were.
I mean, no.
Because we all were.
No. Jesus did not found the Catholic Church.
He founded the church.
Jesus existed, and then the apostles taught people.
Yeah.
And then at some point, those people were like, we should organize more officially and call ourselves the Catholic Church.
Well, they called themselves the Universal Church.
That's
which
what, yeah.
the word Catholic
means
but
universal.
To be fair, I actually think if there were a Catholic in the room with us, he'd probably say we weren't founded by Jesus any more than any other denomination was. We were founded by Peter. That's probably what they would say. Because Peter was the first pope.
Which I also don't.
Even though the term pope didn't show up until much later, but he was the first pope.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't wear the funny hat and didn't occupy an office and didn't have all the ceremonial things that current popes have, Peter virtually did not resemble modern popes at all, but apparently he was the first pope. You can tell I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll skip the Catholics for now.
Yeah, we'll skip the Catholics because that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with some that are a little, and we're also for the same reason skipping the Eastern Orthodox because they're
basically Catholic.
Well, they also claim to have been founded by Jesus.
Well, because they're basically Catholic.
Catholics, yes.
They had the schism.
Yeah.
Which
where they were like, no, we're actually right, you're wrong, and Catholics are like, no.
If you actually look into the schism, if you look at it now, it's kind of like when you compare it to the Protestant division, it's like, wait, you guys divided over that? Like the Protestants had a much bigger complaint.
Yeah. Speaking of Protestants, we will talk about Martin Luther a little bit. The guy's a lunatic.
dude, okay.
I was looking up quotes from Martin Luther because
Yeah.
he started Protestantism, and at first I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a cool quote. I wonder what else he said, and I'm like, what?
Okay, so let's just go
The
ahead
guy
and
was a
get this.
heretic, man.
Let's just address the elephant in the room. Oftentimes you will hear people talk about, you know, the founder of your religion. You can learn a lot about a group by who founded it.
Mm-hmm.
That does not serve Protestants very well. Because Martin Luther was nuts.
Yeah.
I happen to believe that while he was kind of crazy, he believed a lot of things about the Catholic Church that were true, and so I'm like, okay, he had his points about the Catholic Church.
He was right about the Catholics being wrong.
Yeah. I don't really I can't really get on board with his whole hating the Jews thing. That's and boy, he had a lot to say about the Jews.
Well, okay, I can summarize summarize him in 2 quotes right here.
Okay, let's go.
So the first one, even if I knew tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. I actually think that's a fantastic quote.
That's great.
That's awesome.
That's really smart, actually. That's a really good way to look at life.
Yeah, I agree. And I read that.
You act as though you have, however, 80, 90 years in this life,
and I think
knowing full well that you could go tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you're prepared, morally speaking. You're like, okay, if I go meet Jesus tomorrow, am I taken care of? Yes. But I'm also not just gonna. God's given me this life, and I'm gonna use it to the best of my ability. And if he takes me early, that's on him.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I like that quote.
And then he turns around. I don't know what order it was, but then another quote: "I have greater confidence in my wife and my pupils than I have in Christ." That one was more tame than
okay.
There was another one that I felt dirty reading out loud.
There's got to be some context, right?
I didn't see context for this one. There's another one.
There's got to be some context.
There was another one
because that's
where he was saying he views God as a villain. Basically, he uses it like a I can't remember the word he used, but it was basically he views God as a scoundrel, I think, or something like that.
But is that
and then there's
really
another
that
one that
far off from the sword of Damocles speech?
And let me know if I'm way off base or something. Because that's I want to know.
Maybe Lutherans can get onto us.
Yeah,
about this.
but another quote I found from him was, and I can't remember what the quotation was, but he was basically arguing that Jesus fornicated with all of the women that were following him around, and the lady at the well.
No.
And I could not find any sarcasm in it. I could not find any sarcasm. If there's something I don't know, please let me know.
There's got to be something else to
but
that.
I was like, this guy's a lunatic?
That's just straight heresy.
I
mean,
know.
that's
why I was like, what?
Bottom of the barrel heresy. There's no way.
Which is why I'm not just jumping on it like he was horrible. No, it's I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't have time to double and triple check these quotes. But if you know more about this, please let us know in the comments. Because this was interesting.
Now, maybe a bunch of Catholics are going to get in the comments and be like, yeah, see, we told you, he sucks. I don't know. But, man, that's wild. I do know he hated the Jews. I do know that he hated the Pope and believed the Pope was the Antichrist. And he swore by the fact that the Pope was the Antichrist. And he was like, we're living in the end times because that guy is claiming to serve Jesus, but he does not serve Jesus. He serves the enemy. He hated the Pope.
I think one of the founders of Baptist beliefs, if I remember correctly, I think
believe very similar. Well, there's actually a long
in the 1500s.
Yeah.
So
there's a long and storied tradition of Protestants viewing the Pope as the Antichrist, actually. I don't personally believe that, even though I think this Pope is kind of a loon. But not even a loon, he's just a lefty. He's just a lefty who may or may not be a little bit heretical. But I see the Pope as just a prominent theologian. Meaning he could be a wrong theologian or he could be a right theologian, but that's all he is just a prominent theologian.
I see him as a prominent politician.
Well, he's kind of both.
In my opinion, he's a politician who writes on theology. Because you do not become elected
theologian.
Think about how he gets
politics.
Think about how they choose the Pope.
Well, yeah, it's
a bunch of rich guys who
I don't know that they're all rich.
Sections.
No, I don't think.
How could you be a cardinal in the Catholic Church and not be rich?
Because your salary is set by the church. You probably get paid like $120,000,
well,
which is fine money. Don't get me wrong, but
fair enough. I don't know. I don't think
the Cardinals are rich. There
was historically.
Yes, there was a time in which all of these guys were the landed elite, but I don't think that's the case.
They still are a big deal. You can't say they don't have influence.
Influence, absolutely, because there's only like,
And you
what,
get-
26 of them or something? I don't know how many.
and they're appointed.
Yeah.
So how do you get appointed to literally any
You're
job?
appointed by the Pope, right?
No, to any job.
They're appointed
ever.
by the Pope, right?
Yes. I
Yeah.
believe,
Or
I can't
are
remember,
the,
something
or
like
maybe
that.
the other cardinals vote on appointments?
something like that. My point is, if
You-
if anybody
We're
in
not,
any profession,
we're not making a strong case against Catholicism when we don't even know what they do.
No, I know. But my point is, in any profession, regardless of what it is,
Yeah.
if you are appointed, there is a set of things you have to do to become appointed.
Yeah.
Usually, the big section of that is convincing other people to appoint you.
And that
is
means
politics.
knowing people. Yeah,
It
that's
means
politics.
knowing people.
That's why.
It means schmoozing up to people. It means doing what other people want you to do and convincing them to do what you want to do.
And side note, this bleeds over now that we're talking about religion and politics. Here's a funny thing. A lot of people think that all judges should be appointed, because judges are like, they're supposed to be a nonpartisan thing. It's supposed to be an apolitical position.
It doesn't exist.
The idea that an appointed judge, just because you are appointed, it means you're apolitical, is ridiculous.
It's absurd.
I
Proven false throughout history.
have seen in all areas of the country judges who are appointed acting in very partisan manners, just the same as judges who are elected. In Tennessee, our judges are elected, but
I mean, they have their own political views regardless.
yes, they do. And if there's a vacancy on the bench, sometimes that vacancy will be filled by an appointment rather than an election. And I happen to know of a judge who was appointed to replace it, to fill a vacancy, and he was appointed because he happened to have worked in the Tennessee Capitol Hill for a while and knew a lot of guys. And
They were like, "Oh, you'd be good for the
yeah.
job."
Now, granted, they were right. He was very good for
That's
the job,
good.
and he's an excellent judge, fantastic judge.
Nice.
But, he knew some people. That's how he got appointed. That's how appointments always work. So
Yes.
you're right. The Cardinals,
In order to become a cardinal, you have
You
to
have
get
to know
appointed,
people.
and then you have to get promoted.
yes,
And then you have to get promoted.
Yes.
And then you have to get promoted.
it's
And then you have to convince the other guys that they should pick you instead of themselves.
it's not very much different than working your way up the corporate ladder,
It's the exact same thing. They invented the corporate ladder.
except for instead of like them worrying about profit margins, they're worrying about other things.
You think the Catholic Church didn't worry about profit margins? Why do you think? Okay,
No.
Tell me. No.
You said
Wait, pause.
past tense.
pause. I'm going to talk about the past Catholic Church for a second
Okay.
because
'Cause I'm
I don't know
differentiating
how
these.
much of this is changed in modern day. So you can tell me that. But at least in
don't-
the past, tell me if this sounds like a business or a church to you. Is okay, sir. I've got our quarterly reports, and we do not have enough money to sustain our fulfillment centers. Like we're starting to run low. People are cashing in the notes we gave them, and we're starting to run low on that. We need something to do. Bob over here says he has a great idea. We can start charging more for the services that we currently give for free. And we think
You're talking about
if we spin it,
indulgences.
if we spin it the right way, people will think that it's actually a great idea and that they should do it. And it's like, you know what? We've got this salvation thing over here. We can just say it's required for that. People will buy it. It'll be fine. It'll increase our profit margin by 17%. You tell me that is not a business decision.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know if they do indulgences anymore.
no, they don't do indulgences anymore.
I didn't think so.
No, they stopped that a while ago. I think.
So kudos to them for that.
Yeah, so that's why
that's
I
a
like
pyramid scheme, is what it is.
That's why I actually like to differentiate between the modern Catholic Church and the.
It is very
so
different.
the Catholic Church that Martin Luther was rebelling against.
Basically doesn't exist anymore.
No, it does. And now the
Or at least
Catholics will
it
say
has
yes,
it has metamorphosized into it has
something
evolved.
else. It has. It's evolved a lot.
Into a much better thing. Okay. Better in certain ways, worse in certain ways, but less.
I think
it's less tyrannical now than it is.
I totally agree. And the thing is too, the theology, and because all the Catholics are going to say, "What are you talking about? Our theology is basically not changed for 2,000 years."
It's like
They're right, sort of. There's the Vatican II, which did change some things, but for the most part, they're right. It stayed pretty consistent for 2,000 years. The difference is the way that. Oh, there's a dog out there. Weird.
oh, is that what that is?
Yeah. The way they run their business, so to speak, has changed significantly over time.
Yes.
So there's the administrative rules, and then there's the theological rules. Theological rules haven't changed too much. The administrative rules have. And the way the church is run nowadays, in my opinion, is a lot better than the way it used to be run. Still not my preferred way.
Yeah.
But it's a way that I can look at, and I see the value in it. I respect it. You know,
I feel like we need to, I don't know, this is probably stupid, but hot take moment.
Okay.
So bear with me if this take is a little too spicy. But I feel like we need to rename.
This episode just needs to be called "Let's Bash the Catholics."
No, actually, I like.
I know that's why. That's why I added the disclaimer at first. I actually generally like.
This is a positive thing about
Okay,
Catholics,
okay.
Or at least to me, it seems like it. So, hot take: maybe we should rename Protestantism to something else that doesn't indicate that we are protesting against Catholics anymore. Because we're really not.
So obviously,
I don't protest the Catholics.
Obviously, the idea of renaming Protestantism.
Obviously, it's not going to catch on.
It's more of a symbolic thing.
100%.
But I tend to agree with you. I actually think Protestant, the phrase, I don't know if it was coined by Catholics. I kind of
that would not surprise
it was.
Me. I mean, they had like all
because
the
it is the Catholic framing.
Yeah.
You're the Protestants. You protest. True. Now, I've heard one Catholic person say this. He's the only one I've ever heard say this. I actually agree 100%. He said he doesn't call it the Protestant Reformation. He calls it the Protestant Revolution.
That's true.
I mean, 100% agree. I just happen to believe in the revolution. Like, the American Revolution was a revolution.
The same thing. Yeah.
But we were the good guys.
It wasn't the American Reformation.
Yes, exactly. And so,
and I think there was probably about the same amount of fighting.
Yes, but think about this now. Americans and the British are on really good terms.
Yeah.
I think we can reach that, and in some parts have already reached that with the Catholics, where we can be on good terms despite the fact that we fought a Revolutionary War, which was for a long time non-violent and then got very violent, eventually ended with the Peace of Westphalia, all that. Everyone knows that. If you don't know that history, you should look it up. I'm not going to explain.
I need to look into the Revolutionary War more. I know.
No, I was talking about the Protestant.
Okay, that makes sense.
Peace of Westphalia, where all the
about that either.
Okay, basically, I think what was it the 7 Years' War? I think it was the 7 Years' War.
I forget which war is which.
I know they all
like the
blend
7
together.
Years' War, the 15 Years' War, the 100 Years' War. It's like which? Okay, the year.
One of the wars, I believe it was the 7 Years' War. Some people will refer to it as the very first World War, because the entirety of Europe was at war, and some of their colonial holdings were warring at the same time.
Yeah.
I believe America was colonized at this point, and the colonies. In fact, this might be what we call the French and Indian War.
I do remember that.
I can't remember.
I
can't remember. It's been a little bit since I've freshened up on that war that ended with the Peace of Westphalia. Basically, it was the Catholics versus the Protestants in Europe. All the Catholic countries were warring each other against all the Protestant countries, and it ended by everyone saying, okay, you know what? Let's make peace, and we're not going to war against you to convert you if you don't war against us to convert us. Within your own state boundaries, you can feel free to be Protestant or Catholic, and we won't get in the way. Now, the funny thing is, that's actually all the Protestants, to my knowledge, ever really wanted. So it was really just forcing a concession out of the Catholic Church to say, don't forcibly convert us. But
Muslim us.
Which is why I have heard Catholics refer to the Peace of Westphalia and be like, actually wasn't such a great thing, you know. It actually kind of ushered in a new liberal world order kind of thing. I've heard people say that, and I'm like, no, I actually do think that if you're a nation state, you have the right to have your own state religion if you want to. We do in America. It's called leftism. That's our state religion. I want to vote it out, but I don't have enough political power.
You were wrong.
I know, that's our state religion. That is it. Yeah. I think we functioned better when our state religion was effectively Christianity, or
at least tried to pretend to be Christianity.
Yeah.
I would take someone trying to pretend to be Christian over someone who's overtly not.
Oh, absolutely.
Pretty much any day. Because pretending to be Christian makes you a better person.
Well, I think it was Voltaire? I think it was Voltaire, who said, he's a famous atheist writer from like the...
Voltaire or the guy that you're talking about?
Yeah, Voltaire.
Or both.
I think he was the Enlightenment era. Very famous writer. Was
he the Pound of Flesh guy?
No.
Or was that someone else? Okay, go ahead.
Pound of Flesh is Shakespeare.
No, am I thinking? Anyway, go ahead.
Voltaire once wrote, he was very famously an atheist, but he once wrote, I may not believe in God, but I really hope my neighbor does. Because everybody generally likes the Christians because we're good, peaceable folk, and we don't really believe in oppression and violence.
People who aren't going out of their way to victimize themselves.
Yeah. So anyway, I say all that to say, going back to the Peace of Westphalia, even that it's very just the core assumptions. This is really the division between the Catholics and Protestants, is the core assumptions about authority and the source of authority. Because my biggest thing, I agree with the Catholics on so many things.
It's really centralist Christianity and
decentralized.
Centralized
and decentralized. Yeah. And I don't think that any human being deserves the kind of authority that the Pope has.
I actually have an interesting quote for you.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, because we got way off track when it comes to the quotes.
I think I wrote it down here. Yeah. See if you can guess what denomination this is from, just for funsies. But enforced uniformity, sooner or later, is the greatest occasion of civil war, ravishing of conscience, persecution of Christ Jesus in his servants, and of the hypocrisy and destruction of millions of souls.
So
interesting, right?
I tend to agree with it.
I know. I was like, wow.
It doesn't seem fiery enough to be Martin Luther, but it seems anti-Catholic enough. Maybe it's John Wesley?
This is Roger Williams.
I don't know who that is.
From The Bloody Tenet of Persecution for Cause of Conscience.
Interesting. I don't know.
He was one of the founders of Baptist.
Okay.
He actually, so the guy, as far as I can tell, that was 1605. So I don't know where that lines up with these, but it sounds like it's in the same general time frame, which would make this make a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I tend to like to quote. You can't. Well, you can and you can't. So here's something interesting historically that I think happened.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Now that we're talking about all this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and use this.
We're on full rant mode now.
Yeah,
so
we are. We're on full.
Okay, so actually, real quick, I have one of my clients. He's from Germany, and he would practice his English with me. He's got great English, but he'd occasionally just like practice stuff. But he always, instead of saying rambling, would say brabbling.
Brabbling.
Every time.
That sounds so German.
Oh, sorry, I'm brabbling right now. I'll stop. And so to me, that's like wondering, like talking all over. We are brabbling right now.
Let's brabble away here. So
Max, if you're watching, you're awesome, dude.
So I think I'm going to say something, and then it's going to bleed into actually the way I see the divisions in the church overall. So, historically speaking, I actually think it was pretty possible to enforce uniformity. I actually think
pretty
possible and pretty achievable. I think for a long time in history, when you just had agrarian nations where everyone was focused on basically being peasant farmers or merchants or stuff like that, people were so wrapped up in just surviving, because surviving was so hard back then. They didn't have
as
time
hard for peasants as you think, but anyway, keep going.
Well,
I'm not completely
successful peasants, but at the same time, if you didn't have a good harvest that year, you might starve.
Not as bad as you think. We can talk about that.
They might.
I don't think my caveats here would change your point at all.
Okay.
So go.
The
go
point
ahead.
is, back in the day, it was a lot harder to just live. Most people lived on a subsistence basis.
Just imagine if you wake up in the morning and you're like, you know what? I'm hungry. I want breakfast. I think I'll have some eggs. And so, in order to make your eggs, you have to go outside, grab some firewood, bring it in, put it in the stove, get some flint and tinder, start an actual campfire in your stove, wait like 20, 30 minutes for it to really heat up, or I don't know how long, wait a few minutes for it to really heat up, and then make sure that fire doesn't stop all day because you'll have to start it over again. And then at the end of the day, empty the ashes out so that you can start a fire tomorrow.
You're exactly on point to where I'm going.
Eggs.
Yes, cooking eggs. Life was so much harder back then.
Yeah.
People did not have the time to actually sit down and like ponder the world.
Yeah.
In those days, it was a lot easier on them and a lot more preferable to leave the thinking to the professional thinkers.
Yeah.
They were professional doers, and then there were priests who were the professional thinkers. And then there were royalty who were the professional lazy people, but who had all the money to hire the guys to protect you. So that's how it worked back then. And so because of that, I think uniformity generally worked. I think you could have laws where you're required to go to mass and people would accept that. And they're like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, no big deal.
That's where I go to see what people are thinking about.
Yeah,
and also to have people do Christianity too.
Yeah, because I can't read. And even if I could read...
That's a fallacy. That one's actually... Most peasants could read. At least in England. Yeah, what they could not read was Latin.
Well, and that's the next
Which is
point
the
I was going to
Bible
say
one.
is even if I could read, the priests won't let me read the Bible.
Yes.
So
But
I've just got to take their word for it
most
anyway.
peasants had enough literacy to do things like either write really simple letters, or at the very
didn't realize
least,
that.
or at the very least, like read them, or like read signs and things like that.
Okay. Okay.
It's just that they would usually be good at their local dialect, and so that may not translate 3 towns over. Because when
dialects were a lot more localized back then.
yes,
And there were a lot
like
more.
I mean, just imagine the difference between Tennessee and Georgia if you had to walk between Tennessee and Georgia.
yeah, if you live right on the border, you might have a different dialect than if
Yes.
you live in Atlanta and Nashville.
Even now, the Atlanta accent versus the Appalachian accent, very, very different.
What is the
Very
Atlanta
different.
accent?
I don't know if I can do it, to be honest.
'Cause
I'm
the-
too Appalachian.
Well, yeah, we're Appalachian, definitely, the two of
Yeah.
us. Although our accent is,
Yeah,
we don't have an Appalachian accent.
yeah, not as much. It
Our
sticks out
dad
sometimes.
doesn't have an accent.
He
Our
does
mom,
now.
he does. Oh, it's getting.
He's
yes,
increasing it the longer he lives.
but he's
here.
lived here for like 35 years.
Yeah.
So, or 40 years, maybe.
Something like that.
Something like that. So because of that, we don't really have much of an accent, even though our mom definitely has an accent.
And the more time I spend with our mom's side of the family, the more of an accent.
The more ever since I've moved back to
Yeah.
live closer to my parents, I have gotten more of an accent. But I mean, you guys listening to me, you can tell. I don't have like,
we don't have super
I
strong.
don't sit here talking like this all the time, you know.
Yeah.
I just don't. We're very familiar with the Appalachian
Yes.
accent, though. So,
The Appalachian accent is more
It's pretty rough.
rounded, and then the Georgian accent I find is
when
a
you
little
say
more
Georgia, are you talking like Southern gentlemen?
like. I'm
kind of thing?
talking. No, that's more of a North South Carolina. South Carolina.
South Carolina and Virginia.
Certain parts of Georgia, for sure.
Virginia.
Virginia
It's
too.
big in Virginia. I remember
So probably North Carolina.
the
too.
old dudes in Virginia all have that accent. I had a professor in law school. I went to law school at Regent University, which is in Virginia Beach. I had a professor who was a federal judge, and he was 86 years old. And he started the class off by randomly pointing out that he goes, "It's amazing to me how young you people are. The Civil War is as far back to me as World War II is for you. And I remember World War II like it was yesterday." That's how he started the class. Okay, so
Wow.
he was old. He had
Yeah.
a pretty thick Southern gentleman accent. The Southern gentleman, I don't do a very good job with it, but you know,
That's decent.
it talks like that. Of course, he was old, so it was a bit more gruff than that.
Sure.
But it's very big in Virginia, and yeah, the Carolinas. It's it's the areas that had a lot of plantation farming. It's the
Yeah.
plantation accent.
Yeah, it really
So
is.
it's a lot. There's a lot of it in Georgia, which is why I asked that question.
Mhm.
I don't know. The Atlanta
Georgia
accent's probably just Ebonics. I don't know. The Atlanta accent.
There is definitely a lot of that.
Yeah.
It depends. So in more inner city Atlanta, Atlanta's weird because we have one of the biggest airports in the world.
That's true. And there's
So
actually
all
a
sorts of
lot of
people
cultural
are there.
diversity
Yeah.
in
Oh yeah.
Atlanta.
You can go on like a 15-minute drive, pass through the hood, and then a rich white neighborhood. And I'm saying, just so you know, I don't like having white and black as like cultures. I don't think those are realistic markers. That's maybe another discussion for another day.
Yeah.
I don't like labels of white and black for people.
I don't
But in
typically
this
like that
case, it would be
it's just a descriptive.
this one. It would be the kind of neighborhood where it is only white people and they are all rich.
Yes.
It's
Which
not-
happens.
yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah,
you
that is a
can't
thing that
deny
happens. And then you can go through one of those, go back into the hood, drive through a place where everybody's Mexican, take a right, and now you're in like a refugee camp from
Yeah.
Assyria or
Yeah.
Syria or whatever.
It's
whichever
very
place it was.
Atlanta's very culturally diverse.
Yeah,
A lot
it's
of people don't realize
crazy. It's really easy to accidentally end up in the wrong neighborhood.
that. I'll bet it is. Ugh. I forget where I was going with that, but
Accents. Yeah. So there's two main Georgia accents, I would say. There's the kind of more inner city sort of accent, which is some hybrid of Ebonics or somewhere on a spectrum of between like Ebonics and or what people call Ebonics. I don't know.
yeah, because the Ebonics itself is a contrivance, but that's
no.
a conversation
It's like,
for another day.
There's like a spectrum between like black inner city, white inner city,
Yeah.
because those are in Atlanta at least. Those are two.
They are
fairly
actually
separate
different cultures. Yeah,
They don't. Yeah.
they're similar, but they're
are-
different enough.
In Atlanta specifically, those are two separate groups of people.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
There's so much nuance here, and I don't like to overgeneralize, but
Yeah.
there's like a spectrum of where you fall on that, depending on how much time you spend in Atlanta proper. Outside of Atlanta, the more rural you get, the more it gets to a kind of a hybrid between what I would call a hillbilly accent and like a Wild West accent. It's like a hybrid between.
You get a
those.
Western accent?
Western and hillbilly are actually really similar.
Well, that's so. When you say hillbilly, are you talking Appalachian?
No, sorry, I'm talking more like Like, you get more of a rustic farmer accent. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's kind of like that. It's a little more sharp-edged in Georgia, whereas in Tennessee it tends to be more rounded and fluid.
Oh, I see what
That's
you...
how
No,
I
I see
think
what
of
you're
it.
saying. Okay.
Yeah.
We got on the topic of accents just because you mentioned that, and I thought it
Yes.
was interesting. But we were talking about life back in the early days. How easy
Yes.
it was to be uniform.
People would know how to read and write to some extent in their own dialect,
Yeah,
but they may
couldn't
not be able to communicate
the
with
town of-
someone
yeah.
3 towns over.
Okay.
Or at least not very well.
At least in written form.
It would be like, honestly, it would be like me going up to inner city Boston and trying to talk to someone, and I'll be like,
Now that's a weird
you
accent.
parked the car?
Yeah.
What's a car park? Oh, a car park,
If we didn't
Parking
have the
lot.
internet to already tell us what to
Yes,
expect, which
exactly.
we do, but
Yeah.
yeah, because if I didn't know the Boston accent and I went
that'd
up
be
to
so
Boston,
confusing.
and I have I have relatives who are Bostonians on my wife's side,
Oh yeah.
and if I didn't know the Boston accent, I would get confused.
Mhm.
I really would.
Yeah.
But I say all this to say it was a lot. People outsourced thinking a lot back in those days.
Yeah, at least the really philosophical, abstract thinking.
Yeah. But then something weird happened, which is that some of the thinkers decided to start thinking about freedom and liberty and all that sort of stuff. You get like John Locke kind of people. And they are using Christianity. So this all started after the Protestant Revolution. So once you throw off the bonds of the Pope and people start to get into a little more free thinking, they start reading the Bible for themselves. All of a sudden, they start thinking, okay, well, I'm thinking free now, and I'm reading the Bible myself, and I look at the Bible, and boy, it talks a lot about freedom, and, you know, maybe it's talking about freedom more in the metaphysical sense, but there's a connection between the metaphysical and
I'd
the physical.
argue it's way more literal than it is metaphysical.
And I think it's
Personally.
both, and I think a lot of these guys
I think
were
the Bible
catching on
is
to that.
primarily literal in most places. There are exceptions. There are specifically poetic sections. But outside of that, with the historical parts, I personally think it's primarily literal, but it's literal in such a way that it has metaphysical implications.
I agree with you. That's actually not what I'm getting at when I
Okay.
say metaphysical. Because I agree. What I'm saying is, like, when Jesus says it's for freedom's sake that Christ, or when Paul says for freedom's sake that Christ set us free, that's a metaphysical statement inherently. Because he's not saying Jesus literally freed you from Rome. He's saying he freed you from sin. That's
fair. That's
it's a
fair.
but it's a metaphysical
think
truth
that
that
is a
has
very
very
literal-
physical implications.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
See, I think it's a literal truth that has metaphysical implications. I think he actually meant it fairly literally. Although, caveat, Paul really was a philosopher.
Yeah, he was. But the thing is,
Slash theologian.
it's really both, and you kind of get into a chicken and egg situation when you figure out
Yeah.
which one he was primarily but the point I'm trying to make is people started reading that stuff and they said, okay, it's for freedom's sake that Christ set me free from sin. That's good. Why am I free? What am I supposed to do
Free
with
to
my
what?
freedom? Yeah,
Freedom isn't just
to
a thing
do
that happens.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm free for a reason. People started to think that really messed with the order of things, because freedom wasn't really an issue until people started thinking like that. Once you started reading the Bible for yourself and stopped just outsourcing your thinking, then freedom starts to really be something that starts to become very
Wait,
important
what
to
do
people.
I do with that?
Yeah. And then you get people like John Locke who are thinking about political freedom. And I'm not saying John Locke's the greatest philosopher of all time. Said a lot of interesting things. Said a lot of things I'm not thrilled with. He was in some ways more liberal than I am, in some ways more conservative than I am. So I'm not necessarily saying I'm a Lockean, but he was, regardless, a very important figure for the development of political theory, no matter what you think of him.
Oh yeah. The
So when
modern,
this-
Western political theory,
exactly.
for sure.
So what happens when you get to this stage? Is people start worrying about freedom a lot, and they don't like when their churches tell them what to think.
Yeah.
And that's when you get all these different denominations coming up out of nowhere. It wasn't just the Catholics versus the Anglicans. You have the Presbyterians and the Baptists and the Anabaptists and the...
Because every time someone disagreed, they're like, fine, I'll just go start my own church.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Catholics use that as a point of derision. The Catholics say, see, you guys are just kind of arbitrarily splitting all the time. You have no unity. And the Bible talks about how unity is a good thing. That's true. It is a good thing. Here's what I think is going on behind the scenes of that. What I think is going on behind the scenes of that is God always makes sure that his gospel has a platform throughout all of Christian history, he's always made sure, no matter what's going on in the world, the gospel is being preached and being taught and being pushed out. He's always made sure of that. So the Catholic Church worked as the sort of universal platform for the gospel for a long time. And in fact,
despite all their issues, they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, they did. And if I had to guess, I'd probably, frankly, say that's God's preferred method. Is, hey, here's the one unit, and this is where I'm putting my message out on this one platform. Problem is, humans have a tendency to corrupt things. So as the Catholic Church got more corrupt and corrupt and corrupt, people started thinking about freedom more. These things happen simultaneously. You get Luther, you get the split. Yeah. God sees the development of human consciousness towards free thinking, and he says, okay, I need to reach those people too. I want to reach the people who are fine with outsourcing most of their thinking, so I still use the Catholic Church, but I need to reach those people who are a bit more free thinking too. And so I think God is actually totally okay with having a million different denominations, because I think he uses each denomination as a tool to kind of get specific types of people. Now, what the Catholics may say is, but the other denominations are wrong. Only one denomination can be totally right. They'd say it's the Catholics, but maybe they'd say, okay, I think we're totally right.
Totally right.
But maybe someone else is more right than we. But either way, there's going to be one denomination that's going to be more right than all the others.
In theory, maybe.
In theory.
Unless we're all in orbit around the same thing.
And that's my point.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, because I'm making fun of the Catholics, but talk to a Baptist, they basically say the same thing. Yeah, I like
Catholics better than Baptists.
Although, it depends.
Caveat: a lot of the Baptists I know in person, I actually like a lot, and they're awesome people. Yeah. But Baptists as a whole, I'd rather. Well,
there's a big difference between the Southern Baptists and the Independent Baptists.
Yes,
big difference.
Big difference.
But they would say too, yeah, we're more right than all the other guys. And admittedly, I think I'm more right than all the other guys. I think that. But if I'm really being honest, I actually think that there's a lot of theological disputes that really don't matter a ton in the grand scheme of things to God. Yeah. I'm not saying they don't matter at all. I think, I think it's very possible to be wrong about something and God say, yeah, you're wrong. And you are wrong, because God...
Isn't that just...
Objective,
Isn't that why he died for us?
Well, yeah, that's...
Because it's like, we were wrong about things, and he's like, you know what? You're not going to get it right. Let me come and fix it for you.
Exactly. And so I think... I'm not saying that God doesn't care about the truth, and I'm not saying there isn't a truth, one truth. There is one truth. And I think God's sitting up there in his perfect wisdom, noticing how everyone is deviating from the one truth, whatever that is. Maybe if the Catholics are right, it is the Catholic Church, okay? I don't think so, but maybe it is. And maybe he's noticing how everybody's deviating. But I think he's okay with a certain amount of deviation. Obviously, you go too far, you get into heresy.
Yeah.
That's a different story. But he's okay with a certain amount of deviation, particularly in the administrative side rather than the theological side, on how you conduct the business of your church. I think he's pretty okay with deviations over there. And so he uses those deviations to get to different people. And I'll use the example of my church, the Vineyard Church. I go to a Vineyard Church. Vineyard, nationally, is a very casual church. It's a church designed for the casual people because it was founded by hippie surfers in California.
Yeah.
So the Vineyard is specifically designed, you might say, to go after the people who love being barefoot and casual, and to whom the formality of other churches would be a barrier to entry. Now, the formal churches might say, well, that should be a barrier to entry because it's a moral requirement that you treat this formally. I understand that sentiment. I don't think that's God's perspective. I think God, maybe to give the formal churches some credence, maybe like assume you're correct, at least in some respect, that God would prefer everyone to put on their Sunday best, so to speak, before they're going to church. Maybe that is what God prefers. It wouldn't actually shock me if he prefers that. But I think there's a difference between him preferring it and him requiring it. He might say, if you're really on top of things, then you're going to put your suit on to come to church. But he might also say, but I understand where you're coming from. I understand your whole life story and how that's going to be a barrier. So I'll accept you coming in your shorts and a t-shirt, because the important thing is that you hear my gospel message, and I don't take it as a sign of disrespect coming from you. Even though if the Catholic went to church in flip-flops, it would be a sign of disrespect, because the Catholic has been taught that that is a sign of so it's all about kind of your intentions in the heart.
So I've got a curious question.
Okay.
And
I don't know if I communicated that.
No, I think you communicated
really
it well.
but
There are a lot of so many directions I was tempted to go off on, but I want to let you finish first.
No, that's basically it.
Yeah.
God just uses each denomination to get to different people, and
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Maybe I'll give the more formal churches the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that when these denominations go after people who are less formal and all that, maybe that's objectively worse on some level, but it's still a matter of, wouldn't you rather them get the gospel than not get the gospel? And I think Jesus says, yeah, I would rather them get the gospel.
So on that,
I will sacrifice a little bit of the formality in order to get to you.
And I have a thought on that. So it seems to me that the reason to dress up formally for church, or for church, is basically a sign of showing respect to God.
Yeah,
right? That's what most people say. It's like you dress up nicely because you want to comport yourself in a way that is inspiring reverence and honoring God. 100% agree with that. That's a good thing. Can we agree that in and of itself, without any other context, is actually like fine? Like that's a good thing.
Yes.
We can also probably both agree that there are a lot of people who really need to be exposed to Jesus, to church in general, who are a lot more likely to actually come to a church and learn about God if they can show up in a ratty shirt and shorts and no shoes.
Yeah, I think you're explaining what I was trying to say better than how I explained it.
I'm just expounding on it.
No, I think you're right. That's
both
what I'm
of those
getting.
Things are important, right?
Yeah, they're very important.
As someone who is outside, I don't ascribe to any denomination. I think they're all largely wrong. But
what a classic contrarian this
I know.
is.
What can I say? I'm a 4. But I'm a 4. I'm a compulsory snowflake. It sounds to me, again, coming from the outside, it kind of sounds to me like a sort of ideal workflow if I was playing a video, like a civilization like The Sims, for example, and I was trying to min-max the population that went to church. Sounds to me like I would want to make a bunch of vineyards to acquire people, train them up a little bit, and then once they've been Christians for maybe 5 or 10 years, send them off to Catholics to get some real Christianity.
I think Catholics would probably agree with that.
I'm using Catholics as an extreme example, but actually Catholics aren't the most formal.
No.
I'm saying basically like, it sounds to me like you've got your entry level church, which is like, hey, you can be a hobo and come to this church and we will welcome you with open arms. We'll hobo with you. Maybe we'll go surfing later. And then you've got churches that are like, okay, we expect you to comport yourself with respect and dignity because we are doing reverence. We are revering our God, and this is very serious. I think both of those are good. And it sounds to me like the second one is kind of a more ideal situation, but there's a lot of people who aren't ready for that. So from your description, it kind of sounds like people should start out at the vineyard and then graduate from the vineyard and go.
So then let me adjust my description a little bit, because that's not quite what I believe.
Exactly why
because I go to a vineyard church and I tend to think of myself as fairly theologically robust. I'm not, I do read this stuff. I'm not just a total fly by the seat of my pants guy.
And I'm not saying everyone in a vineyard doesn't know what they're talking about.
In fact, I would say,
any means.
Frankly, basically everyone who's in charge of vineyard stuff is typically very well read. One of the reasons why I like the church is that they're very serious about their theology. I have my disagreements with some of it more on the national level, but it's a very localized, federalized, so to speak, denomination, which is why I can feel totally happy.
Federalized meaning like
federalism, subsidiary.
Okay,
it's very
feudalistic?
No.
It sounds more feudalistic. Federal to me means
they believe in the principle of subsidiarity, is basically what I'm trying to say. Okay. And they believe that pretty strong.
Okay.
And so there's a lot.
There's
a lot of latitude that individual vineyards are granted in the way they conduct their business, as long as they subscribe to kind of the core.
It's like a franchise.
It's a franchise because it's less. It's less controlling than a franchise.
Isn't a franchise like, hey, do this, follow these rules, and you can use our logo?
Yeah, but there's more rules.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, the rules for vineyard are basically, here's our core tenets.
As long as
you believe in these core tenets, you're fine. That's basically the way vineyard.
Incidentally, my biggest issue with vineyard as a whole is I think they give too much benefit of the doubt to potential threats. And when I say threats, I mean, that's actually a whole other thing. When I say threats,
I think I agree with you, but I want to see where you're going.
When I say a threat, I mean a threat to the, not dignity, a threat to the integrity of the church. So I very firmly believe in something I've heard a lot of CEOs say, that I highly respect, that culture trickles down from the top.
Yeah, I agree.
The person at the top because they set the direction that the culture is going in, and then everyone else does some element of copying that, and then solidity and unity come from the bottom up. I think that's
I don't think I could have said it better myself. Cool. Yeah.
So with that in mind, I think if you allow someone who is who is internally, even externally, someone who is acting in a way that seems heretical or just bad or promoting things that are not good, those are going to leak down and trickle and infect the other people because that person is leading. And the longer you leave a bad leader in charge, the more bad the people they're leading are going to be, and the more people who are not willing to be bad you will lose. And I've seen this happen.
Yeah.
I have actively seen it happen, and my biggest issue with the Vineyard is they don't kick out the bad apples soon enough.
Soon enough is the key words.
I definitely believe in grace.
Yeah.
But I have seen, I have literally watched as they gave someone who was an atrocious influence, years to just fester before they actually got rid of them. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
If I had been in charge, they would have been out day one.
Agreed.
100%.
And this is
this is with me wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt because I liked them as a person until they started getting weird, which not going to get into details of that.
Yeah,
but
we don't have to get into details.
It was just.
Yeah. I agree with you. So that's actually that's why I said that caveat about not totally loving everything the National Vineyard is doing, because I'm on a public platform. I didn't want people to think that, oh, he says he's Vineyard, he must agree with everything they do.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I'm Vineyard is that Vineyard is okay with me disagreeing to a certain degree.
To their credit, I will give them credit for that.
Yes.
That's better than a lot of.
They're not okay with me disagreeing on certain principles. So, for example, if I were to come out and be like, you know what, I've been totally convinced of this whole gay marriage thing, I'm totally on board, they'd be like, okay, fair enough, but you're not Vineyard anymore.
I think they'd give you about a year.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay.
So
that's the issue that was one of the big parts of the issue that.
But so
we're not. You probably know how we feel about Pride Month at this point.
Actually, you definitely know how we feel about Pride Month. No, they've actually in response to that kind of thing happening. Cause that kind of thing didn't just happen with us and the people we know. It happened elsewhere. In response to that, from what I understand, and it's not like I have some great inside info. This is kind of more outside looking in. From what I understand, they seem to have reacted to the fact that they responded too slow to a lot of these things and changed their ways. Yeah, they seem to have adapted.
Huge bonus points for that. A lot of organizations don't adapt. So the guy who's currently in charge of the American branch, a guy named Jay Pathak, I don't think I agree with everything Jay Pathak does, but I think I agree with enough of him to be like, okay, I think you're doing good work for Jesus. Cool. There are some things he does that I'm like, I think that's a mistake. I think you're maybe letting in a little bit of a Trojan horse, and I don't think you see that you're letting in a Trojan horse, but you are at least on the right path, and I think you're following the logic of Jesus very well, and he doesn't have a problem with just kind of drawing moral lines and saying, if it pisses you off, sorry, but you're gonna have to leave. And the first sermon I ever heard him give, it was at a give. Heard him gave. There's that Appalachian coming out.
There it is. First sermon I ever heard him give, he was speaking at a regional conference in the Southeast. It was right after he had just gotten appointed as the new guy. And he basically said, at least in part of his sermon, he focused one part of his sermon on basically saying, okay, yeah, we're supposed to love each other, guys, but we can love people without accepting all of this nonsense that's coming our way. We don't believe in that nonsense. You can love someone who thinks they are the opposite sex without accepting that as truth. Yeah. And that was the point. And he had a very clear stand on stuff like this, all the sexual perversion. Very clear stand on that.
Sexual perversion.
Yeah.
If someone is gay, I don't hate them.
Of course not.
Honestly, a lot of me, I'm like, look, it's your life. You make your decisions. If you want to go snort cocaine, you shouldn't. It's bad for you, but I'm not going to hate you because you snorted cocaine.
Exactly. I actually think it's mostly
You probably shouldn't, because that one actually does usually make you a horrible person, but that's a whole other thing.
I actually think in this day and age, and maybe this wasn't the case 35 years ago. I'm not 35 years old, so I can't say that. But I think in this day and age, the idea of like Christians hating on gays is just left-wing propaganda, and it largely doesn't exist.
I will say
there are some. There are
places
where it exists.
Highly localized.
It is localized, and it's also
literally just in really rural places where they never encounter gay people.
And it's not common either.
No.
It's not in most rural. I live.
Christians get persecuted more than gay people these days.
Oh,
and the government doesn't have a National Christians Day.
No, it doesn't.
You could argue
much like the
Christmas,
National Christian Month.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Now, and that's just in America we're more persecuted. Christians all across the world have suffered more persecution than
gay people ever have.
Yeah, although granted, gay people are pretty persecuted in some parts of the world, like Gaza.
Yes.
So I'm not
but
discounting
to be fair,
that.
in Gaza, everyone's persecuted.
Well, that's true. That's very true. Or Iran, where everyone is persecuted. Yeah. So, anyway, I say all that to say, I like the Vineyard because I think if Jay Pathak happened to be listening to this, which I guarantee you he's not, he's got better things to do. But if he happened to be listening to this, he'd probably be like, okay, fair enough. We can have our disagreements. As long as you believe in the things that are in our statement of faith, I think we're probably square. Yeah. And I respect that, which is why I like the Vineyard.
Yeah.
I also respect the fact that he's a very serious thinker and he does his due diligence with theology.
And if
someone Vineyard historically has done that.
If they actually take their time to think about it and then they come to a conclusion and we disagree, I'm fine with that.
Me too. Hey,
my one requirement is like, if you're going to disagree with me, use your brain.
Yes.
Think about your disagreement. Decide why. Know why you believe what you believe. And I'm happy to say, okay, we can disagree to disagree.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
That's what I say about politics all the time, because I'm a bit of a political expert. Self-appointed expert.
You're definitely more involved in it than I am.
Yeah, and especially
my
on the
politics
more
is very cynical.
Yes, and especially on the more philosophical side, I'm very well versed when it comes to the hard-nosed electioneering. Not as well versed in that, but when it comes to the philosophical side, I'm really well versed in political theory, like really well versed.
Yeah.
And I have told people before who disagree with me, if you have a conversation with me, one of two things is going to happen. Either one, you will end up agreeing with me by the end of the conversation, or two, we're going to boil down where our values are different, and then we can disagree on that value, because politics is just values based. But so much of the disagreement is because there are people who just believe things that aren't true. Yeah. I know enough to correct them. Right, I know the facts.
I would actually say people who act on beliefs that they don't know are true, or that they don't realize are untrue. That's what I meant.
That happens a lot. Either way,
both. But
I know how to isolate those beliefs that aren't like based on reality.
Yeah.
And boil it down into, okay, where is your value at? And if you just have different values than me, if you're not a Christian, we're probably going to disagree. Yep. If you are a Christian and you believe largely the things that I believe, honestly, we're probably going to agree on most things.
Since we are Christian, I would say that outside of the context of extremism, which you can never agree with an extremist. But outside the context
of bad faith actors, like the trans activists, they're just bad faith actors.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But outside the context of people who are just so out there that they're just wonky, regular people.
Yeah, I'm talking about regular people.
You can follow almost any religion, and we'll probably agree on like any real religion, not all the pseudo-atheist religions like Unitarian and Scientology and stuff like that. But if you ignore those, if you get down to like actual religions like Buddhists, Confucian, well, not really religion, but you know what I mean. Muslims are a little bit of there's an asterisk there, but still.
If I know where you're going, I agree.
I think you do.
Yeah.
Hindus, I think your typical person in most religions is going to agree on a lot of stuff with your typical actual Christian.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the values are the same. It's like families are important. Moms and dads are important.
Yep.
Having kids is usually important.
There's actually, fun fact,
respecting authority is important. Those things we can usually all agree on.
And there's a pretty populated mosque there are probably a few mosques around the Chattanooga area.
Yeah.
But there's one in particular I'm thinking of that's pretty populated. They're all Republicans. It is an extremely Republican crowd over in that mosque.
Why would a Muslim vote for trans people?
Exactly.
I think that's literally
why would a Muslim vote for the party against fathers? Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That's where Muslims and Christians can agree.
Yeah.
And that's why
Hindus too.
Yes. And that's why you'll see a lot of Christians who are like, some Christians get a little confused on how we're supposed to view the Muslims, actually. Because on the one hand, they're like, you're totally with me on, like, the trans stuff, and that's great. But then on the other hand, it'll be like, we have been at war. Our civilizations have been at war, basically, since, like, 600 AD.
There are a lot of aspects
the Muslims,
to that statement,
yeah, the Muslims did invade Europe multiple times to try
so did the Christians.
The Christians' invasions were more reactions to protect the Holy Land than anything else.
Although a lot of time they were also just political maneuvering, and there
was
obviously
a lot of excess that happened in those war campaigns, because what war is without excess? Every excess happens in basically every war.
War is the nuclear option.
Yeah, it is, and
it's always the most extreme possibility.
Yeah. So look, there's moral...
and just to be clear, war's awful.
Yes,
I think we can all agree on that. War stinks. Sometimes it happens, and that stinks. Sometimes it happens, and it really shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens because it's necessary. Like when, Anyway.
But my point is, Christians sometimes get confused.
Yes.
On like,
don't get me started on that one.
Yeah. My personal take is, if you are a Muslim in the vein of like these Muslims who are in the Chattanooga area who are largely Republican, I'm pretty okay with you. I have my theological disagreements, but I'm like, you know what? We can agree on so much. I'm perfectly happy to live in society with you and have a good time, and that's all fine and dandy. Yeah. You're the kind of guy who wants to blow up innocent people. That's where I draw the line.
I draw the line way before that.
But I'm using hyperbole.
Yeah. The thing is, they don't see them as innocent. That's the horrifying thing.
Yeah,
and that's again, that might be a whole other conversation.
It will. The only point I'm trying to make is politically, I'm more than happy to align with people who I theologically disagree with, as long as there's enough of a baseline to go with.
Yeah.
And with Muslims, oftentimes there's enough of a baseline to go with.
Yeah.
So I have no problem allying with Muslims on a political level. No problem at all, unless they are. As long as they're Muslims that like the general Western order rather than hate the general Western order.
Yeah.
Because there's some.
We're not going to ally with them because they hate us intrinsically.
Right. But at the same time, there's plenty of atheistic liberals who also hate the Western order. I don't want to ally with them either.
No.
So it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
In fact, frankly, if I could decide any group of people to deport.
We were just doing the same math in our heads.
Any group of people to deport once the people who are illegal are gone.
College students.
At least at like Harvard and Yale.
Yeah.
Basically,
Ivy League college students.
Affluent, liberal, white women are kind of the downfall of America in a lot of ways. Yeah. I don't mean to be too painting too
really
broad of a brush. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like saying they're the problem that need a final solution. That's not what I'm getting at.
No.
But they're like most of our political problems.
That group is a problem. People like Joe Biden.
Yes, people like Joe Biden.
The woman tried to pretend that he did a good job in the debate. We're not going to go on. This is not a current events podcast, so we're not going to go in depth.
No, it's not. But that was
no sane human being can watch that debate and think Biden did a good job.
We cannot help but talk about this.
Yeah.
So for context, we're recording this like just days basically after that happened.
Yeah.
The debate.
It's like it wasn't even a debate.
No,
it was literally Biden tried. It was to
elder
remember
abuse.
Some things. It was elder abuse
by another elder.
Like if you literally watched that and thought Biden won at all, then you just need to get your eyes checked.
What are you on?
I don't know what you watched.
Yeah,
and I'm not even saying that. Like I don't like Biden's policies at all. I don't consider myself a Republican. I'm more in the middle.
He is a Republican. He just doesn't want to consider himself a Republican.
I don't like a lot of things about Republicans.
I don't either, but I'm still a Republican.
I am only...
because there are only two parties.
The only reason I fall into the Republican category is because the other side has expanded has gone so far sideways that the red kind of crept up and took me over.
But you're not actually a centrist. You're billing yourself as more of a centrist, but you're not. You're pretty conservative.
Let me. Okay, I am conservative, but I'm always willing to listen to other people. I don't think.
So is just about every conservative I know.
I know a lot that are not.
I'm not saying those people don't exist.
Most of the people I know aren't willing to listen. And I consider
one way or the other. I mean,
I don't align with a political party because I'm willing to listen. I think I'm not willing to take a political party onto my identity in any way. Because I don't want that dirt on my identity.
Yeah, but then if you vote Republican every time, then it just
that's not my identity. I literally,
I mean, I don't.
what I
Republican
do-
isn't my identity either.
I do what I can to research in good faith the political opponents, and when I can find someone who's not radically left and not radically right, I'm going to look in and see why they're not radical on either one. The thing is, if you look at measurements based on how they vote, they're either 100% blue or 100% red, and there is no in between.
No, there's actually plenty of in between.
Not in
On the national level. On the national level, there's plenty of in between.
When I look at that's fair.
Look, okay, so on that note,
I don't want to get into politics too much.
Yeah, we don't have
topics religion, but
but I think this ties into religion from the simple fact that when it comes to especially the conservative side of the aisle, it's a lot of the motivation is very religious. Religiously oriented.
On that note, there are I think it's exactly two reasons that I qualify as conservative. The first is conservatives are generally against abortion, which I think is an absolute atrocity.
Yeah.
I know.
And that's why you could never ever vote for a Democrat anymore.
Yeah.
You could have in 1960. There were some pro-life Democrats. They don't exist anymore.
They don't exist anymore. And that in itself throws me way into red, even though I'm not like, I think a lot of Republicans are just dirtbags.
But see,
it's just
there's
that they're not promoting genocide.
But there's a long and storied tradition in the Republican Party about hating the people who are in charge of the Republican Party.
Then maybe
that just makes you a Republican.
Them. Maybe the party's broken.
I agree. The party is broken. But my point is, the reason I say you're solidly a conservative is because all of your complaints about various Republicans in office are from the conservative side. Yeah. They're saying you're basically saying you're not conservative enough for me, or
too conservative.
You're too corrupt. No, because the people you have that are too far right are not conservative.
No, that's not true. So the people that I don't like the people I'm calling too conservative are the people who are trying to conserve things that I think need to change.
Like what? Give me an example.
I don't have any off the top. I'm going based on what I remember of last time I did research.
The reason I am asking the question this way, and the reason why I'm still...
It's a fair question.
The reason I'm still pressing this on the theology episode is because, at core, correct me if I'm wrong, your political views are informed by your religious worldview.
100%.
You are first a Christian, and then from your Christianness, you then develop a political philosophy.
I think that is a very fair thing to say, yes.
Same with
There might be a weird asterisk in there, but if so...
It's the same with me. So, because of that, I actually think it's a really interesting exercise to ascertain why a Christian believes certain political things.
Yes.
Because it's a good way to actually 100%. Get down to the core values surrounding... So, for example, you're not a Mitt Romney fan, are you?
I honestly, it's been a while. I haven't done my research for the election yet, so I don't remember. But I don't think I like it. What do you mean for the
election?
The election's coming up. I do my political research before the election.
Mitt Romney's he's not running for...
Well, I mean, when I'm not about to vote for someone, I don't care about politicians.
Okay.
That's what
Mitt Romney, you know who Mitt Romney is,
I'm trying to remember which one he is.
The guy who ran for president in 2012 and lost to Barack Obama.
I don't think I liked him.
Yeah. No, neither do I. He's a senator now.
Where's he senator of?
Utah.
So
here's a funny thing about Romney.
Isn't he like a fake conservative or something like that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So here's a funny thing about Romney. Romney, and you may not know this.
He's the guy that
he's the guy who talks kind of like this.
He was losing elections, and so he switched to red because he thought that would get him more votes?
He didn't switch to red, but he moved states. That's what I was getting into.
That's what it was. Okay.
So here's an interesting story into Romney's political career.
I'm gonna pull up his face so I can see it.
Yeah, you'll recognize him.
Yeah.
Romney is actually a member of a political dynasty. I think it was dad.
Oh, yeah, I can't stand that guy.
I knew you couldn't stand him.
I saw his face.
He's a smarmy little nerd.
He calls himself a Republican?
Yes.
Oh my word, dude. That guy's so left.
So,
anyway.
Romney was a political dynasty, I believe, initially in Michigan. I think Romney, it might be his dad, it might be his uncle, something like that, was like a mayor of Detroit for a while or something like that. I can't remember what his dad did, but his dad was in politics for a while. Romney lived in Massachusetts, got elected governor of Massachusetts as a Republican. Now, if you're a Republican governor of Massachusetts, it means you're only barely Republican because Massachusetts is a blue state.
It means you put an R by your name.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with Charlie Baker, who just left office in Massachusetts. He was a Republican, but he's a Republican, So Mitt Romney, governor of Massachusetts.
Are there Democrats that pretend to be Democrats but are actually conservative?
No, because they've all switched parties by now. Like, they've all become independents. For example,
that's very intriguing.
Joe Manchin, is kind of beliefs-wise, he's more of a moderate Republican. He was a Democrat for a while. He just switched to independent.
Okay.
So that's what they typically do on the other side.
I want to come back to that. There's hopefully I'll remember. There's a thing I want to get your thoughts on. But
So anyway, Romney, governor of Massachusetts, runs for president, fails because nobody actually likes Mitt Romney. So then he, I think, wanted to run for senator of Massachusetts, or maybe tried. I can't remember if he actually ran a campaign or if he just looked into it. Ended up realizing that he was not popular in Massachusetts because it's too liberal. But he's a Mormon. And so he thought, I'll bet you if I move to Utah,
they'll vote for
I
me
could get elected.
I can put an M by my name.
Exactly. And sure enough, he goes to Utah and gets elected.
Like, hey, we can elect a Mormon.
Yeah. So funny enough,
man.
is the other guy who serves from Utah, Mike Lee, is great. Super conservative. His name on Twitter is Based Mike Lee, which is great. I don't know how he got that, but that's great. Mike Lee's great. Mitt Romney just sucks. I knew you didn't like Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
Why did I know he didn't like Mitt Romney?
Because
Mitt Romney's values do not reflect with our values.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney's values are more politics first than his Mormonism second. And it's really more the political zeitgeist kind of thing, the liberal frameworks. And I don't think Mitt Romney's beliefs are informed primarily by his Mormonism. I think Mike Lee's are. And Mormons and Christians politically end up in the same boat a lot.
If we're on theology, I'm going to derail us a little bit.
Okay,
Mormons.
you want to talk about Mormons.
Okay.
Which, by the way...
2 things about Mormons.
Question.
1, I love Mormons. 2, I hate that they call themselves Christian.
Yes, I agree with that. Question for the audience, though. Do you actually find the term Mormon offensive if you're a Mormon? I have heard that Mormons don't like the term Mormon. But I might have just heard that from some stupid lib who thinks that everything is offensive.
I know they always label themselves Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. So maybe Mormon is a term of derision.
I'm not really sure. I just know that I'm not using it derisively.
Yeah, we're just going to use the term Mormon because it's the term that we use. And if you find it offensive, let us know.
It's easier to say than LDS.
Yeah. Let us know.
Yeah, if it's offensive to you, like that's the kind of offensive that I'm like, okay, if that's a hurtful label, I'm not going to use it.
Yeah, although for now I'm going to use it, and you can just.
Well, we don't know if it's actually.
Yeah,
offensive.
you can just understand that we don't mean any offense by it.
Yeah, I don't think badly of you.
Yeah. So Mormons.
Yes.
I was thinking about this. Actually, I was thinking about this last night for some reason. My take on Mormonism is, 1, every Mormon I've ever met or come into contact with or seen has been nothing but nice and great and personable and friendly.
And fake.
No, I've never met a fake Mormon.
There's always a weird thing to every single one I've ever met.
So every Mormon I've ever seen, I really like. Now, granted, most of the Mormons I've been exposed to have been public figures rather than on an individual level.
Fair.
So that might taint my opinion. So, for example, Glenn Beck, Mormon.
Okay.
Mike Lee, Mormon.
I didn't realize Glenn Beck was Mormon.
Yeah, he's a Mormon.
Mormons are everywhere.
They are.
Absolutely everywhere.
They are. So
it's crazy.
Through my experience in Mormons, they are typically actually really intelligent people who think very well.
There are 2 kinds of Mormons, though. There's the Mormons that go out into society to win society over, and that's who you're talking about right now. There's also the stay-at-home Mormons who never talk to anybody and are like really just within their own bubble.
Maybe you're right.
It's a different story. I'll just say
and you may be right.
That's
my maybe tainted view statistically is of the Mormons who are more intellectually inclined. My point is, I see a lot of very intelligent people. Mike Lee, constitutional scholar, attorney before he was a senator, brilliant guy. Truly, I think he's really smart. Might be smarter than me. Probably smarter than me. At the same time, I do not understand. I cannot fathom why the Mormon religion can be intellectually compelling to somebody. I actually don't understand. If you want to correct me in the comments and tell me all the if you want to be a Mormon apologist in the comments, go for it.
If you have been converted to Mormonism,
yes, I would love to hear
why. Please tell me what convinced you.
Yes,
because to me it seems really weird.
There's nothing about the Mormon theology that I look at and think, oh, maybe that does like explain the world a little better.
From what I've seen, I think a lot of the time they win people over with how they talk about their religion, and people are like, oh, that sounds awesome, and like love is the focus, and they're Christian and stuff, and then they get involved, and by the time you're like into it enough to realize, wait a second, this isn't actually the same. Maybe you're deep enough to where I think, and this is my biggest gripe with the Mormon Church. I think for lack of a better term. I've got a lot of gripes, but again, I love the Mormons I've interacted with. There's a weirdness to them.
You can love someone and disagree vociferously with them.
Yes.
We do that all the time.
Yes. But I feel like the Mormon Church as a whole is excruciatingly deceptive. And if you look at their website,
I just don't know.
They have an FAQ on the official like Mormon website, and it pretends to answer a bunch of questions, and then they'll do stuff like they'll say in answer to a question, they'll say like a common Christian belief, and then I'm like, okay, yeah, 100%, and then they'll go, and blah 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 blah, and that and blah 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 is something completely heretical. But if you're not reading it carefully, then it can seem like, oh, they're basically they're Christian, and so, it's like, no.
That raises an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Catholics typically believe that Protestants are largely heretics.
Mm-hmm.
Protestants and Catholics typically believe that Mormons are heretics. Do the Mormons look at us the way we look at Catholics?
I think so. At least I'm just talking about like on an official level, like what the documentation I've read from them and how I've heard Mormons talk about it and stuff. Like, I think, at least it was founded with that in mind. The founder was like, yeah, the existing church is completely heretical. I'm going to do another reformation. This is the real church. But that's what he was saying. That's what Joseph Smith said.
Here's the thing that I just really struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
How do you? I think history is really significant. Like, having your beliefs time tested.
Oh, gotcha.
And I think that the Catholics obviously have the advantage there.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the various Protestant denominations have enough history behind them to have a certain amount of cred. And I don't see Mormons as having that kind of cred. Well, now, you may be thinking...
Their founders started their history.
Exactly. You may be thinking, well, Colson, you're Vineyard. Vineyard didn't come around until the 70s. I understand that. But a lot of Vineyard theology is actually just different denominations kind of pieced together. Mm-hmm. Vineyard, we've studied all the theologians from all the different denominations and basically said, okay, here's the theologians, here's the Bible, let's compare and contrast. Where we think the theologians are going away from the Bible, we'll leave that behind, but where it looks like they're aligned with the Bible, we'll take that. And so Vineyard is actually kind of a patchwork of a lot of and so that's why a lot of our beliefs are very traditional. In fact, in some ways more traditional than most Protestant churches, because some of our beliefs are actually kind of a revival of some ancient church traditions that were lost in the shuffle a long time ago.
On that note, I don't like the way people use traditional these days. Because when they say traditional, they're often referring to a 1950s view of the world. Which
is only traditional in some aspect.
That's what I'm saying.
What's the tradition to which you are referring?
For example, one good example is when people say traditional marriage. They are referring to the idea of marriage that basically exists in the 1950s.
No,
listen to me. Of a man who is the sole provider for the family, going out and working 9 to 5, and then coming home so that he can be for a few hours with his wife and child who stayed at home all day cleaning the house and cooking.
What?
That is the idea most people think of when they say traditional marriage.
No, most people when they said traditional marriage mean some of those things, but you're focusing it too much on the 1950s.
But when someone says that is what they're thinking of. A traditional wife. No, like, listen to people talk about a traditional wife, and they will say a woman who stays home with the kids and cooks and cleans.
Yeah, because that is literally traditional in the sense that is how
women have worked. Women have had jobs literally forever. A typical peasant,
the jobs in the home, though, that's the big difference.
Going back to medieval Europe, specifically in England, I'm pretty sure this happened in most of the medieval era. In that time, so you've got the peasant who works the fields all day. The guy works the fields, he comes home, his woman's at home, she probably took care of the kids all day and cooked and cleaned and stuff.
And churned butter and made clothes to sell at market.
Yes.
And it was not a job.
No, it is, though. It would literally, her income was often equal to or more than, depending on her skill, equal to or more than his.
I don't know that that's...
I've seen stats on it.
Yeah, but...
Feel free to look into it more.
But the problem with analyzing it on that granular level is those numbers are actually really hard to come up with, like, hundreds of years after the fact when they didn't keep that kind of data.
They did keep records. They kept all sorts of records.
But it wasn't the kind of records that we keep today. There's a translation gap. I've studied a lot.
There's less of one than you think.
I've studied a lot of economics.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of economists will say, basically, before the mercantilistic era, it gets more and more difficult to actually track economic activity.
Sure.
And you can only track it, especially going back to the Roman times. I know you're not talking about Roman times. Especially going back to the Roman times, like, there are economists who will be like, okay, here's the average GDP of a household in Roman times, and they're like, but here's the huge asterisk where we don't actually know, we're just estimating.
Yeah.
So a lot of that, I don't necessarily...
What I'm saying is people under... The idea that a woman... What I don't like is the idea that a woman's role is to do nothing but take care of the kids and cook food.
Well,
food and kids, I think, is not... Because I think, personally, for one thing, that is a particular section of your life as a woman. What happens when the kids are gone? Do you just not do anything forever?
No, you go and do other things.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to stop your life. You can. I'm not saying it's like bad to just watch.
I don't think any serious person, and I'll say serious person because there's plenty of unserious people out there who believe things that we both disagree with. I don't think any serious person believes that a woman should just stop her life once her kids graduate. So
that's
for
what
example,
I see in the people I know.
If
serious
you
or not,
genuinely think
live.
that they're unserious people, here's what the serious...
Okay, most people are unserious, though.
Actually, yes. Here's what the serious people... Yeah. Yeah. Here's what the serious people will say. So, like...
Let us know in the comments if you're serious.
You may be an unserious person.
Yeah.
Here's what the serious people will tell you. The serious people will, like, how the life might go. You have kids early. That's the traditional ways to have kids early. Why? Because it's easier. Because one, as the kids get older, you're still robust and healthy enough.
You're still younger.
Yeah. But two, it's just, for women, it's a lot easier to have kids the younger you are. The older you get, the harder it is to have kids.
Yeah, with a lower limit, of course.
Yes. So, you start young, you raise your kids. What does a woman do after the kids are gone? A lot of the time, these days...
Nothing.
No. A lot of the time, it'll be like, oh, okay, now I'm going to go get my master's degree. I can't tell you how...
That kind of stuff, I wish more people were like that. But most of the women I know who had kids and just did that, they just stopped. Well, they just kind of...
I mean, if that's what you want to do, fine, but, like,
I don't
you don't
think anybody
have to
should
do
ever
that.
retire, by the way, but that's a whole other thing.
I tend to agree with you. You should just move on to different things.
If you retire from your 9-to-5 job to go pursue other things, that, I think, is fantastic.
And I think
But retirement being, I sit at home and watch TV and occasionally spend time with people sometimes, I think that is... So you're literally just being like, okay, I'm ready to die.
The traditional worldview is... okay, once you retire from raising the kids, go do something else. And
no,
oftentimes
that's not traditional. There was no such thing as retirement until literally the 20s.
I'm using the term retiring the way you used it. But I'm saying once the kids are out of the house.
People worked until they died
I know.
for a long time.
Once the kids are out of the house, you just focus on different efforts. That's what I'm trying to say. And women did that just as much as men.
I'm saying that tradition only goes back maybe 100 years. That's what I'm saying. That's my thing. My issue with the word traditional is people usually only go back maybe 100 years.
There is.
No one goes pre-industrial with it.
Yeah, there is a shift once the industrial age happens.
Yeah, because
that's a real shift. But here's why. The women's kind of economic activity was in home industries. It was in making clothes. Most of the time, making clothes for the kids.
Not just
but
clothes.
Also selling those clothes at the market.
Tools sometimes too, actually.
Making tools, churning butter.
Wait, what time frame are we talking about?
Pre-industrial.
Okay, cool.
Churning butter, doing all...
Yeah.
A woman at home was an incredibly busy person.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And not just running around chasing
kids. She wasn't just derping around.
Because guess what? If you had sons were out on the farms being managed by the dad.
Or going and apprenticing under a blacksmith.
Right, so they weren't just chasing around their teenage boy or whatever. Yeah. They were doing stuff.
Let's bring apprenticeships back, by the way.
Agreed. That's a different story. But once the Industrial Revolution happened, all those home businesses got industrialized. All of a sudden, clothes were made by factories and mass-produced.
Yeah.
Butter was made by factories, mass-produced. And the women didn't have anything to do anymore.
Women literally lost their jobs.
Yes.
And then now most people, when they think of traditional...
That's where feminism came from.
What they think of.
That's where feminism came from. It came from a whole bunch of women who sat around and said, I don't have anything to do anymore. Let me go to work. Because I want to do something. Yeah. And then, but the problem
guys were like, you can't have our jobs. You're girls.
But that's...
And they were like, I can do anything.
Well, and that's the thing about the feminist movement, is it's like, it was born out of a real struggle. Every time technology changes, it does create some real cultural
It hurts people temporarily, and then boosts the culture as a whole later.
Sometimes permanently, though. Yeah.
In a period of time, it causes pain. And then the society as a whole has growing pains, and then usually ends up better off overall in a certain way.
Usually,
depending on how you measure better off.
Yeah.
There's like a million aspects here.
But so that's where feminism came from.
That's the thing.
The problem is though,
in the
the way they went about solving the problem was so ill-conceived that it spawned a whole ideology that has completely false premises.
I actually have a kind of a hot take on that, by the way. I think that philosophy is only for people who are either spoiled or bored. That's
actually, yeah, that's
if you have time to think about philosophy, then you've got nothing better to do with your time. And I think feminism happened because a bunch of an entire demographic was used to having stuff to do, and all of a sudden didn't have anything to do. They got bored and made up a philosophy.
That happened.
That happens with a lot of things.
The problem is the philosophy.
They're not the only ones.
The philosophy they made up was really bad.
That's usually what happens for people who haven't studied it at all.
But the problem,
they hadn't studied
the thing is, what confuses people is the problem they were facing was a very real problem. Women want to feel like they're obviously like anyone else, that they're participating, that they're adding value to the
humans.
world. Yeah, what do you know? They're humans.
Humans like to improve.
Now, the reality is, raising kids, even in this day and age where you're not also churning butter and making clothes and stuff,
it's still a lot of
raising kids is more than enough to contribute. And in fact, it's the most significant thing you'll ever contribute to society. The most significant thing I am ever contributing to society is not this podcast. It's not my legal career. It's my kids. Because my wife and I were just talking about this earlier today. Something crazy to think about. And this really puts it in perspective. When you have kids, you are partnering with God, obviously, to create an immortal soul. You're not just bringing a physical person into the physical world. You're actually adding a new soul into heaven that previously did not exist. Now you're partnering with, I'm not saying we create souls. You're partnering with God to do this. But
the hope is,
the kids are eternal. They're not that, you don't just have kids because they affect the world. They affect after the world too. And so
think about that.
That's why it's such a big deal. That's why kids are such a big deal. So when you devote your life...
Fun fact, Mormons would agree with you.
Yeah, and I agree with Mormons in that. So when you devote most of your kind of earthly life to raising those kids, one of the most important things you could ever do. Now, granted, once you're done, once your kids are all off and out of the house, what do?
You do still.
I hope you don't just give up. I hope you still try to do things that are important. For example, one of the people...
Kids aren't all there is to life. They're just a really big, important thing.
There's an older couple I'm familiar with who they had the very traditional marriage going on. Dad was the breadwinner. Mom stayed at home with the kids. Very traditional. Mom didn't work. Okay. Kids left the house. What does mom do? She goes and gets her doctorate in psychotherapy and is now a practicing psychotherapist.
See, that's awesome.
I think that's great. My wife... When she gets done raising our kids, and even, she's going to prepare for this beforehand so that she doesn't have to do all this from scratch. She has plans to do stuff in the psychology realm. She's not just going to sit on her hands when all of our kids leave the house. That's the traditional view. And anyone who says...
traditional.
Yes, that's the true traditional view. Anyone who says that the actual real traditional view is basically that mom retires once the kids are off to college and sits on her butt and watches
just
TV.
To have kids.
But I don't even want to glorify that by addressing that as a potential for a traditional.
That's what people say. That's what that's the
that is more of
how people act.
That is more of a slander on traditional people
I
than it
hear
is
this
an
from
actual...
conservatives. I hear conservatives talk this way. This is an actual belief that exists within the Conservative Party.
I'm not saying those people who believe that don't exist. I'm saying
Brett Cooper acts like that.
What?
Yes. Now, the way she talks about it specifically, and she's absorbing the way she talks about it.
So that's a conservative influencer.
Yeah. What I'm saying is the way she talks about traditional stuff, and I know that she's not the kind to stop working altogether just because she gets married and has kids or something. Absolutely not. But the way she talks about it often implies that the purpose of women is to have kids. I don't think she actually believes that, but the way she influences about it.
I would say that it's...
That's actually one of my biggest gripes with her. I think she's awesome, by the way.
I would say that's probably... not every woman can have kids, obviously, and so there's that.
Which is why I don't think women are solely designed for kids.
Nobody serious, again, thinks that women are solely designed for kids.
I think that's naive, but okay.
I've never met a single person.
I've met a bunch.
So maybe you live in a weird community. I don't know.
I live in Atlanta.
I don't.
So.
Okay. I don't know about Atlanta.
You're the one that lives in a weird community. Most people are not in a semi-rural place like Chattanooga.
But even
normal.
even the people, the influencers or people that I listen to, nobody actually asserts that as what they believe. It is primarily a slander on those people.
Their actions assert it, though. Their actions and the way they act speaks way louder than the actual words. I don't care what someone says. I
don't understand what. So if a woman stays at home and doesn't work, why is that a problem?
It's not innately a problem unless you're expecting them to turn their life off for like 15 years, 20 years while they raise a kid.
What do you even mean by turning your life off? You can't turn your life off while you're raising a kid. That's not how it works.
A lot of people, I disagree. So
unless you're just not raising your kid,
we're talking past each other, right?
Raising your kid is a very it's
a lot of time. It's a lot of effort.
Your kid. Anyway. Your kid, if you're raising your kid properly, is going to be the center of your life.
There are a lot of people.
No, I'm not saying you should. It doesn't necessarily have to be the center of your schedule or anything. Don't get me wrong there, but like, it's the most important thing you're doing. Raising my kid, most important thing I'm doing. So obviously, so my wife, she doesn't work. She doesn't bring any income into the house.
And that's fine. I'm not trashing that.
What she does, though...
Y'all made that decision consciously. You didn't do this. Is just what people do.
Yeah, but the reality is, this is what annoys me about the slander of people who live my lifestyle.
So, I hear this stuff from conservatives, not liberals. I don't listen to liberals online usually.
The
ones that are online are too insufferable. I'll talk to one in person usually.
Yeah, the online
I've got a lot of
really
friends
are
who are liberal,
insufferable,
and they're fine.
But the thing that annoys me is the reality is this: as a general principle, almost I don't know if I'd say almost every, but a large percentage of married couples are going to be happier when they go that route. There are exceptions to that rule. If you're an exception to that rule, the route of man the breadwinner, mom stays home with the kids, and I don't subscribe to the belief that when the kids leave, she should just give up. You know,
yeah.
We're taking that off.
Yeah.
So mom said, the reality is most couples are going to be happier in that respect because that leans into the giftings of each sex the best.
Sure.
Now the reality is there are people who are not going to exactly fit that mold, and that's fine. No serious thinker on this level, on the traditional lifestyle,
is going to apply that to literally everyone.
Yes, every serious thinker is going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you can't have kids. Guess what? There's still plenty of meaningful stuff you can do.
Yeah.
Or maybe
there are a lot of people who disagree with that statement, by the way.
Who said?
A lot of people.
I have never heard a single person.
You live in Chattanooga.
Okay, hold on. I've never heard a single person say, if you can't have kids, your life isn't meaningful.
I've heard a lot of people say that.
You have actually heard people say those words.
If they don't say it directly, then they imply it with what they say.
Then I'm forced to conclude that they're not serious people, I guess.
No.
So the way, no serious person
if you look at the way Matt, wrong Matt. Hold on, the Matt from Daily Wire.
Matt Walsh does not believe that.
He says it. He says everyone needs to have kids,
and he specifically says if you can't have physical kids, there are other things you can do to play the father role and the mother role.
Then he said that like very careful with how.
No, he
does not always say it. Matt Walsh drives me nuts with the way he talks about family.
Here's the thing. He says that every time, but the clips that go around cut that part out.
They're his clips. I watch his clips. I don't watch other people clipping
if you're watching the
matter
whole
of
show,
principle. I watch his shorts that he makes or that his people make for him. That's what I watch.
I don't know. I don't watch the shorts. I watch the whole show. And so
I've sometimes watched the whole show. He drives me nuts. I respect him as a man. I think he's awesome for what he does in a lot of ways. I can't stand the way he talks.
And that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here trying to defend Matt Walsh. I don't really care too much. Matt Walsh isn't me.
I'm just using an example to let you know I'm talking about real people.
But see, if he's your example, then that's exactly my point.
Candace Owens also talks about non-parents.
Candace Owens
here's my issue. Here's my issue, okay?
Candace Owens isn't a serious person.
People who have kids often act like people who don't have kids couldn't possibly understand the world. And I vehemently disagree with that. I know you're probably, like, I suspect...
I'm processing that.
Yeah.
I'm processing that.
And they act like kids is all there is. And that's what the implication of that is.
Here's why I think people like you and people like...
I don't have kids. He has a kid.
Yes. You can tell.
So this is why there's some debate here.
Yes. I think people like you and people like, we'll use the example of Matt Walsh since he's the example you used.
Sure.
Here's where I think they talk past each other. So the reality is when you talk publicly about subjects, you're very in tune typically to what the kind of consensus is on the other side if you disagree with it.
Yeah.
And your primary goal is to combat those people.
Yeah.
And so you're going to tailor what you say to combat those people.
And that is the core of one of my issues with a lot of people. I understand
that
you have
happens
to do
in
it.
commentary a lot.
Yes.
And so
And
what
I
often
understand
ends up
that it's
happening
frustrating.
is you highlight one point so much to combat people over here.
That you look like
that
you're way
these
more
third-
extreme than you are.
Yes, and that does happen. And these third people are like, wait a minute, but why don't you talk about like this aspect of it? And then they'll be like, well, yeah, that's true, but like I'm not
But
talking
that's
to you,
not
I'm
the point.
talking
I'm
to
arguing
them.
with this person.
Yeah,
Here's the
that
problem.
happens.
Here's my problem with that.
So, well, hold on.
Well,
the people, that's why you two are talking past each other.
I'm sure.
Because the reality is, I think if you sat down and talked with anyone who's like this, if you actually had a conversation, you'd probably agree on most things. Because I am like that.
I think so.
And we agree on most things. That's how I know. Because I am very much a kid-focused guy. And and so...
Which I think is... I don't think that's a negative thing.
Yeah, I know. But I think when you stop kind of... These people are reacting to a very anti-kid world.
Yes.
And so because the world is so anti-kid, they're fighting that. And so they have to be super duper, super pro kid all the time, everywhere, ever. Yeah. And I get that. I actually think that's an important thing to do. Yes. And I don't knock them for doing that at all.
But my issue with it is a lot of these people get so caught up with fighting the enemy that they pick out, they have a lot of collateral damage in the form of people who aren't the enemy but look kind of like them.
Maybe.
No, 100%. I know.
I don't know.
I'm often that collateral.
But
there's a lot of... I love the Daily Wire, but a lot of their people I've stopped watching because they have so many insults they throw out that I'm like, technically they don't like me.
I'm curious. What do you mean by that?
It's not something I want to talk about publicly.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, no.
So I guess, but I still think, I think in that perspective though, what you're really getting at is that you're talking past each other.
Yes, but they have a big platform.
It's a communication issue.
But what my point is
not a morals
most people
issue.
don't put as much effort into understanding other people as I do. Especially not influencers. Most people just digest the content.
But I think if you were to say people who believe like that don't understand other people, I think that would just be a mistake. I think you're wrong. I think the people who say the things about kids that they say do understand people like you. And they actually have specifically addressed it on their shows on numerous occasions, but you can't address everything at every time.
And I don't expect them to.
Sometimes people miss it.
But the overall message that they are sending as a platform is that not having kids is bad.
Well, and let me kind of go full circle here and talk about Catholics. Part of your issue is that you're not a Catholic, and Matt Walsh is a Catholic.
Yes.
Catholics don't believe in contraception.
Yes.
And the reason they don't believe in contraception is they don't believe you really have a right to decide whether or not to have kids. Yeah. That's up to God.
Which I understand that train of thought.
So
I'm not 100% decided on what I think about.
Yeah. So frankly, I'm not either, actually.
Yeah.
I can see both sides of that argument quite a lot. And so I don't know exactly. So so whenever you're hearing someone talk about family and you realize they're a Catholic, you need to kind of draw a line and say, oh, I know why they're saying that.
I do.
It's because they have this core belief that they don't believe in contraception.
Yeah, and
so
do
obviously,
that.
if you don't believe in contraception, then you believe that if you're not having kids, you're doing something wrong.
Yes, I totally
Or
get
you're
that.
a priest.
Yeah. And I get that. And what I'm saying is...
And so you shouldn't take that
they
personally.
They have a very broad audience, and the way they say it sometimes makes me feel bad about myself. So what does it make the person who's not as intellectually intentional as I am think?
But at the same time, you can't fault somebody for just preaching Catholic doctrine when they're Catholic.
What I'm faulting them for is assuming that everyone they're talking to partially agrees with them or hates their guts.
I don't think that's what's going on at all. I think they're just Catholic, and they're just articulating a Catholic worldview because they're Catholic. And I can't blame someone for that. I'm not Catholic, but the same thing happened with Harrison Butker. Harrison Butker is a Catholic guy who gave a speech at a Catholic university and said very Catholic things, and it offended everybody because everyone's like, well, I'm not Catholic, and I disagree with that. That's fine. You can disagree with it all you want.
Just because
you're
it's
not
a Catholic belief doesn't mean you're devoid of responsibility for how you present it.
But if you just present it as this is the truth, because
then
I
you're
believe
just
it's the
another
truth.
annoying person.
No, every time I say something, I say a theological thing, I present it as the truth because I believe it as the truth. So why should we expect anyone else to do anything differently other than tell the truth the way they see it? He sees it, so using Matt Walsh as the sacrificial example here again, he sees it as if you're not having kids and you're in a marriage, you're either infertile or you're doing something immoral. Why should we expect him to say anything different?
He believes that is truth.
Yes.
But he's mean about it.
And see, that's where
that's just what he does. That's
where I don't
care. That's a lot of my issue.
That's why I don't care.
I know.
I'm like...
That's why there's both of us
If you're a little... Yeah, because we are very different in this
Yes,
respect.
I care.
If you're a little grumpy...
That's what separates me from conservatives.
No, but that's also a slander that
You
conservatives
don't care. You explicitly said you don't care. Matt Walsh explicitly says he doesn't care about people.
No, he doesn't. That's not what I said.
No, he explicitly said if you believe such and such, I just don't care. He will
about
say
how you
stuff
react to...
Well, sure,
my
but
beliefs.
I
And
don't
yeah,
think
they're
he'd
true.
care
I
on a
know.
personal level. But if anyone watching has read the Brandon Sanderson Stormlight series,
Which I haven't.
I personally, I think I would be one of the I'm forgetting her name, the sassy urchin girl who eats food and can turn it into Stormlight or whatever. She's an amazing character, by the way. Her order of the Knights Radiant is the order that I most associate with personally. Like I feel like one of them. And her entire order of knights, it's a whole thing. I can tell you about it later. Her entire order of knights, the oath they say to become one of these knights is I will remember I will remember those who are forgotten, or something like that. It's like the people that everyone else glances over because it's like, I'm sorry, you're just not important enough for me to deal with you. It's like each individual person of those are the people I look out for. Those are the people I care about. Is the people that you don't have time for because you're fighting the big bad guy.
But then there's the other aspect of truth. Truth is truth, and
doesn't mean you have to slap people in the face with it. Sometimes you do.
You need to be blunt though. If you're a public figure,
you need to be.
If you're talking in private, it's different.
You need to be honest. Honest and blunt are not the same thing.
And you need to be blunt if you're talking in public.
I don't fully agree.
Words are so twisted all the time. You have to make it very clear.
Straightforward, yes.
Yeah,
blunt,
straightforward.
I don't think I'd go that far. I think there's a place for... Now, sometimes you have to. I'm not saying never. But I think there's a place for saying something that's true in a way that doesn't come across like, stop being an idiot.
But
you
see,
should believe this.
I actually think that most of the time, you or people like you are reacting to people like Matt Walsh. So, for example... we keep using Matt Walsh because here's the example.
He's just a great example that he really likes, and I find Matt Walsh very annoying. For reference, I probably would have absolutely no issue with Matt Walsh on like a person-to-person basis. He may not like me.
He may not like me either. I don't really care.
He might be like, I don't know. I doubt. If he wanted to sit and fish for like 4 hours, I'd get super bored, but I'd be content to sit there next to him and fish for 4 hours and just be quiet.
Okay.
Like, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, whatever. I'm not a fisherman.
That's the reason I just said that to say
I respect Matt Walsh.
We're picking on Matt Walsh just as a representative of a larger demographic.
He's a good pivot.
Yes. And so as that representative, as that pivot, the reason that I actually think that people who react to him the way you do are actually just being unfair to what he actually says and are being...
I may have to come back with
references. Are being... taking things personally that he does not mean as personal. And I've listened to his show quite a bit.
His tone makes it personal. And part of it is he's, I think, amping it up for the performance aspect of his job, because there is a performance
I don't know.
aspect
I actually think he's probably like that in real life. Frankly.
Very possible.
I don't.
And I've heard him in like regular everyday conversations. I like his just talking to someone persona way better than his performance persona. His performance persona is the one that irritates me.
I don't really.
But even in just a conversational basis, like, because the thing is, I've heard him in actual conversations, like interviews and stuff, where he's not having to fight the person he's talking to, where he's just like, yeah, like, this is what I think. If you don't, then fine, whatever, do your thing. I don't care. But there's certain things I do care about, and here's why. That I'm fine with, but his public persona when he's more performing is really abrasive in a way.
I think there's the larger issue I'm trying to get at is he has been accused all the time, and again, he and people like him have been accused all the time of telling people how to live their lives. I think, and he has addressed that complaint.
I see where you're going.
He's addressed that complaint so many times that I actually just think, So when he says, "Here's the truth as I see it," how can I blame him for that? Because that's what I do.
My issue with it comes from it's not that he's telling people how to live their lives, although I can see how it comes across like that, it's the way he says it is often very condescending. And you got to understand,
See,
for most people who are not robots like you, I'm just joking about that, but for most people who are more emotionally based, because you're a very mentally based person,
yes,
very intellectually based, for more emotional people, or people who are more, whose emotions are more volatile, I should say, because yours kind of do this. Like that's like your emotion. That's what it seems like your emotions do. Like you're fairly consistent emotionally.
I guess so.
At least you seem like it to me.
That's probably true.
Not saying you never have spikes in emotion, because that would be silly. You wouldn't be human. But you tend to be fairly consistent emotionally. For people who are less consistent emotionally, which I can feel for, my emotions are a lot more like this, and it's just something I have to deal with. But for people who are more like that, the tonality of how something is said matters oftentimes more than the words that are said.
But is that just a fault in the listener?
Well, maybe, but if you're talking to millions of people, you should probably think about how millions of people might interact with what you're saying.
No, there's truth to that.
If you're going to broadcast a message, and you know because of Google Analytics what your message is who your message is going to.
Well, then in that case, you have to weigh priorities.
Sure.
Is the priority, what is the higher priority here? And I think when it comes to people who are basically on moral crusades, which is kind of Matt Walsh's whole shtick, he's basically on a moral crusade.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, he does a lot more good than harm. And so if you're on a moral crusade, I think it's more important to just lay your vision of the truth completely bare for everyone to see and hammer it day in, day out. And that's what you do.
That's not my issue with it.
And let the people decide how they feel about it.
Sure.
That
is not my issue with it. My issue is his method of delivery is very condescending. You know,
I just don't see the condescension.
He literally,
at all.
he said, there was something he said, and I think he was probably being a little hyperbolic, but he still said it in such a way that it hurt a lot of people. And he insulted anyone who plays video games. He basically said that you're an idiot and shouldn't be allowed to vote or something like that. I don't remember what he said.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. I think I butchered it.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Pause this.
I know he was...
If you actually... So this might explain why you take offense to him. Is you can't tell when he's joking.
I could tell he was joking. The problem is the way he jokes is hurtful. He jokes like a jerk. He jokes like the kind of person...
He jokes like he's dead. It's called deadpan. It's a whole brand of humor is deadpan.
The problem is there was truth in what he said.
There's truth in every joke.
No, not that kind of way.
Yeah, so
he joked in a way that's like, oh no, I'm just kidding. I'm not actually making fun of you. So except he was. He very much was.
He was.
And I think he would double down on what he said.
So what he's actually saying in that moment is basically, yeah, I think video games are a total waste of time, and if you play video games, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he said it.
I play video games.
The way
Who cares? So Matt Walsh disagrees with my lifestyle. Why should I care?
Said it carries an undertone of implication
that he thinks
and you should feel bad. That's what the way he said it says.
No.
Why did it make so many people mad if that wasn't in there?
People are crybabies. I don't know. No,
see, this is exactly why I don't like conservatives, because they have that mentality.
What I'm getting at is, it's not so much, oh, he wants you to feel bad. It's that he thinks...
I don't care what he wants. I'm talking about what he communicates.
I know. The communication, I think an objective look at the communication is not, I want you to feel bad. It's, I think I've got a more solid understanding of the way to live my life better than you do. And if you don't live your life like me, well, your life probably is worse than mine. So?
And that's fair. Like,
so?
See, if he had said that was what he said, it wouldn't have made me irritated.
But that's
I don't usually care.
I think the obvious read of that statement. I don't
disagree.
even... So, I don't have a problem with somebody articulating a way of life that is very different than my own.
The issue is not that he articulated a way of life.
Or even...
You're arguing on point.
No, or even making a statement that implies that you think you're better than me because you live differently than me. I don't have a problem with that, because if you're a public figure. If you're talking to me on a personal level, it's different. But if you're a public figure, okay. So for example, we talked about the kids thing. I'm a lot more aligned with, again, we're picking on Matt Walsh.
Yeah.
I'm a lot more aligned with him on the kids thing than you are.
Yeah.
But let's go to the video game thing. Or the anime thing, where he says anime is demonic. Which I don't really like anime, but I like some anime.
And he's not always wrong either.
Exactly, he's not always wrong.
And frankly, it's based, like, their national religion is Shintoism.
Yes. So, okay, let's stick to the video game thing. I'm a big gamer. Okay, so is Reagan. I don't video game as much as I used to because I'm an adult and I have responsibilities. But in my spare time, if I've got time to kill, I'm probably going to play some video games.
Yeah.
You know, Matt Walsh might think that I'm totally wasting my time and that it's actually just a dumb move. And I'm a dumb plebe for doing that. He might think that. I don't take offense to that. And I don't understand why you should.
Because it was the way he said it.
He's just one guy. I don't care. Maybe he derides me for playing video games. Why should I care? He's just one guy. Why should I care what Matt Walsh thinks of me? I don't understand.
You are not normal. What you are saying
I don't
applies
get
to
that.
maybe 0.3% of the population.
Maybe
of the world,
I just don't
or
get
at least
that. I
America.
don't get that train of thought. I don't know how that logic follows. Where you're like, I really.
If I could pull it up quickly, I would. I think it would take me too long, so I'm not going to right now.
Okay.
I might bring it next time.
Maybe.
I might bring the quote.
Maybe.
So that we can talk about it more specifically, because I think I would have to like listen to it and point out specific things. Because I can't. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't.
But
have
I
the
also
detailed
just think
memory.
if you're
and it's not like it ruined my life.
I know. You're not saying that.
It's for me
you basically
personally. I was
just said,
like,
okay,
oh,
I don't need to watch your
literally,
content
my
anymore.
reaction was, okay, douchebag, I liked you, and like I liked you. Why are you trash talking me, man?
Yeah. So
that was my
for
reaction.
me, that when someone
it was a totally uncalled for insult from someone I respect.
For me, when someone I respect says something that I find a little bit insulting, like for example, going to other Daily Wire people, there's another Catholic, Michael Knowles. Mm-hmm. He says sometimes he sits there and talks about Catholic stuff. I just roll my eyes because I'm like, these freaking Catholics, man.
They have some weird stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, I was tracking with you, and then you started basically saying that I really shouldn't have my own personal thought when it comes to theology, and I really should just defer to the priests, and now I've totally lost
all
you.
of a sudden, it's like 1984.
Yeah, so,
which I think is the issue Protestants had with Catholics in the first place.
So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I have moments like that with people, influencers like that, who will say these, and I roll my eye, I'm like,
And
okay,
I'm the same way.
I
I'm
lost you.
like, okay.
I lost you. That doesn't make me stop watching them if I believe that most of what they're saying is true.
I don't watch Matt because to me he is insufferable, just in general.
Well, and that's fine. There are people that I don't
think that would
because I think
offend
they're.
him. I think he'd be like, okay,
yeah, exactly.
like, and that's totally fine.
And if your personality, if there's a personality
his
jive
persona
thing, fine.
Yeah.
To me, what
I still
makes
respect him as a person,
right,
and he's done a lot of great stuff.
And to me, what will make me stop paying attention to some kind of influencer is when they do something that, in my view, is so immoral, I no longer respect their worldview.
If they do something where I'm like, oh, okay, you're capable of that, that means you are not the kind of person I thought you
exactly.
were. That's when I
a prime example of that would be Steven Crowder. I listened to a lot of Steven Crowder for a long time, and all that stuff came out first with his contract negotiations, where he clearly did not understand the basics of contract negotiations.
That was baffling.
Which, as a lawyer, that really annoyed me.
I'll tell you what sold me on that one, because at first I was like, okay, it's just some drama. Then I watched some people talking about it, and I was like, okay, I'm a little more curious now. So I watched, if I remember correctly, I watched him talk about it a little bit, and I watched Ben Shapiro talk about it a little bit. The fact that when Ben Shapiro, who is basically a robot, like the man is a brain with a body. And and
people,
the fact that Ben Shapiro was
Ben...
on the verge of tears when he was talking about how his friend hurt him. At least he seemed to me like he was.
You sure you're not talking about boring CEO?
No, I'm talking about Ben Shapiro.
Okay.
Ben Shapiro made a statement on his thing, and I think he was very composed. He's Ben Shapiro, but I felt like when I was watching that, I could see a depth of pain in his eyes, where I was like, he literally, to me, he looked like someone who was like, I had a friend. And I was going to offer him a thing that I was really excited about. And he basically said, F you, how could you do this to me?
And then publicized it.
Yeah, and then publicized it and then trash talked him. And
move.
So just literally, I have a lot of respect for Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just like assume he's right.
Right,
I'm
not either.
In that scenario, like,
he was definitely the more credible
reaction,
party of the two.
Yeah, but even regardless of that, just seeing the emotions that he was suppressing, I'm like, okay, Ben thought he was doing something cool.
Yeah.
Ben thought he was
That's clear.
this is a cool thing. And frankly, Steven Crowder's kind of a douchebag anyway.
Yeah, everyone are. That's the thing.
No one
it's not an extrapolation
to
be like, oh, Steven Crowder was a douchebag.
Yeah,
he's always been a douchebag. He's just a funny douchebag, and so people are like, okay.
But I really got the impression that Ben Shapiro was like, thought they were friends, and Crowder just pooped on him.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh, well.
And then after that, they had that whole very public nasty divorce situation.
I don't keep up with him anymore, so I don't know what happened.
Well, right after that, there was an announcement that he and his wife were getting divorced, and then someone leaked Ring doorbell footage of the two of them having a fight, where he was just being an absolute narcissistic, like emotionally abusive person.
Was it cut to make him seem that way?
It wasn't cut at all. And that's the thing. And then what really convinces you that he did a bad thing is he came out, or he sent one of his buddies to come out and defend it. But the defense was, there was a whole bunch of other videos from other days in which his wife definitely didn't want to get out. And I'm like, okay, so maybe his wife isn't a great person either, but that doesn't
Usually
change
that's how
what
that
was
works.
happening in this situation.
Yeah.
Now, frankly, I don't believe them. I actually, judging from the dynamic I saw, she was beaten down very emotionally. And
Which
they
doesn't surprise me at
yeah,
all.
and they did not
He's-
dispute anything that happened in that.
He didn't say, I wasn't actually a bad person. There's context you don't know.
Yeah.
He said, well, she's not always like that.
Yeah.
And
And so if he had come out and said, look, I acted horribly there. I really regret what I did. It was a horrible, horrible moment. I've asked her to forgive me. You know, if he had done that, I'd be like, okay. I
yeah,
respect
because that shows.
But he
integrity.
didn't. He basically just said,
He did the bully thing.
well, no,
where
what
it's
he
like,
did.
Not actually my fault.
No, well, what he did is he said, before he made his defense of, hey, there's more footage, what he did was he said, yeah, you know, we're not always at our best, you know, sometimes we have bad days. And I'm like, bad day is not abusive.
Yeah.
Like, I've had a lot of fights with my wife over the years, because we had
Not on the porch.
we had a rocky relationship at first. Now we have a great relationship, but our relationship was rocky at first. So I've had a lot of fights with my wife over the years. I've never done anything to that level. Ever. And so I'm
You're
like,
actually a decent person.
yeah, and so when all that
You
came
learn
out,
a lot about a man by the way he treats his wife too.
Yes.
To be fair,
And
you
then-
learn a lot about the wife too usually.
yes,
But because it is a two-way street, but still, like,
but then after that came out, then one of his employees, Dave Landau, the other comedian on the show, left and came out with a video basically saying that Steven was super controlling.
is that what that was?
Yeah, and how he basically, like, he would have a Dave shut up button that would light up a little light that wouldn't
It wouldn't show
the
on
camera
screen?
wouldn't show on screen, that would basically say, Dave, shut up, this is my moment and I need my moment.
Wow.
And you're being too funny, you need to stop
And see,
being too funny. So
Here's
that
the thing. I don't take any of this at face value, but after watching Steven Crowder in interviews, none of that surprises me. Based
Exactly.
on his character that
Exactly.
he
You
showed
can't just-
while talking in an interview.
you can't just take the accusations against somebody
Yeah.
at face value, but
But it
if
does
it
line up to
comports with
everything I've seen
everything
him do.
else you know about the guy, then okay.
Yeah.
And so that's,
He's also really mean when he does the talking with college students and proving them wrong. He's just kind of mean about it.
I disagree. I actually think he typically does that very well.
He sometimes does, but I've seen him be really, really mean in a way
Yeah,
that I'm like,
maybe he
you
has.
literally just turned someone who was kind of in the middle into a diehard enemy.
I don't know. I haven't seen that.
Some of them, not always,
seen,
but
I've
some
seen
of them.
good clips, and now Charlie Kirk has subsumed that, and that's
Yes, Charlie Kirk is a lot nicer and a lot more.
Charlie Kirk.
He seems a lot better.
Actually,
He still says
I've
some
got-
things that sometimes I'm like, bro,
Charlie-
chill a little.
Charlie Kirk says some crazy stuff sometimes, but in general, I really like the guy.
I suspect he
But
and I
he-
would get along.
But sometimes he says some stuff. I'm like,
I'm like, and that's the thing. When you're doing like an improvised debate against somebody you've never met, and you don't even know the subject or you don't know anything about the person.
Yeah.
You can end up. It's really easy to say something that you're like, in hindsight, I could have worded that a lot better.
yeah,
So I don't. Whenever it's like he's in a booth at a college arguing with college students, I'm always taking what each of them says with a bit of salt.
and I think that's appropriate.
Because the college person is really on the spot, and
think-
he's really on the spot.
Yeah,
and
I
so
think-
there's emotions flying, there's crowds.
But I've actually
so-
seen long form interviews with Charlie Kirk that increase my belief in
Yeah.
his being a good faith
Same.
person rather than decrease, and I
Yes,
think that's
which is the opposite with
the-
Steven Crowder.
exactly
Steven
exactly.
Crowder, the more interviews you watch with him, the more it's like, oh, he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Now, to be
full of
fair, from
himself.
what I've heard, that's basically all comedians. But
I mean, yeah.
and yeah,
I mean, not all comedians. They're actually.
Jerry Seinfeld seems like a nice guy.
He seems nice, and then like Joe Rogan seems pretty chill.
I agree. Joe Rogan.
And then
seems
half
like
the
a good guy.
comedians he has on his show, like most of them seem like they chat with him and they sound like
Yeah.
decent. They don't come across as like horrible people, because you can feel that when someone's kind of just being themselves.
You can
feel when they're bad.
you can, at least if you have any kind of discernment, you can actually,
You don't even need discernment. You just need to be a human.
yeah, and you can tell when people. Well, some people can't tell, but the
Some people,
ability,
it's been trained out of them.
yeah, the ability to tell whether someone is being like fake or real,
Yeah.
is within us all. We can
Yeah.
all do it.
Yeah.
So-
Sometimes you have to practice a bit, but
Yeah.
you can learn it no matter.
That's why I'm very persnickety about what influencers I listen to,
Same.
because my primary thing is,
They have to win me over as a regular person before I'll give what they say any weight.
I just have to know that they are telling the truth as they see it.
Yes. If I will
As they see it.
Yes.
If they're not,
And that they are willing to tell me how they see truth.
yes.
Because if someone's saying something,
And that's why I don't
like,
have a problem
know if
with
that
Matt
lines up-
Walsh, because he tells the
exactly.
truth as he sees it.
And that's what I like about Matt Walsh. He's
Yeah.
straightforward, but I think
he's honest.
I think he gets lost in the fight against evil and
Maybe.
ends up hurting people who are not evil because they look kind of like the evil people.
Maybe.
That's what I think.
I don't know. Because I'm just so not bent that way of.
Yeah.
I'm so not bent in the way of worrying about offending people. It's just
You
not.
don't care about any other people's opinions in general.
I don't.
They
I don't care.
affect you.
No.
Which is not a bad thing. Like, you just aren't
So,
affected
for
by
example,
other people's opinions.
I have a lot of. There
Not in
are
the same
people
way,
whose
at least.
opinions I let influence me.
Sure.
So, like, I'll listen to the Daily Wire people. I'll listen to some other people as well. Charlie Kirk's one I'll listen to sometimes.
Yeah.
I'll listen to these, and I'll let their worldview influence me, but I don't actually care what they think of me. And so, like, if they say something that I heartily disagree with, it's not one of, like, there are some, like, fanboy types who are just like, I agree with everything that guy says because I'm a fanboy. Ooh, I can't stand that.
Yeah, no.
Ooh, this just gives me the ick. I can't take that.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want someone to do that with our podcast.
no, definitely
I
not.
want people to disagree where they
Please, good
actually
Lord,
disagree,
no.
so.
Do not fanboy over me.
Yeah, no.
Fanboy gives me the ick.
Yeah.
And so I'm never a fan. And that's why
I don't want a fan club.
Yeah.
I would just like people who are willing to talk about hard things.
That's why I'm actually hesitant to even bring up other influencers by name.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want you to think that I fanboy over other people
Yeah.
just because I consume their content sometimes.
Yeah. There's not an influencer alive who I agree with everything they say.
Absolutely.
Usually it's like I agree
Although
with
there's
a
one that I
percentage of
agree
what
with
they say.
95%.
I'm curious who.
Andrew Clavin. I agree with 95%.
I do not. I disagree with Andrew Clavin more than I disagree with almost. So actually my agreement level with people on the Daily Wire.
Okay, I guess this is a tier list of Daily Wire
Top
influencers
is the people
now.
I agree, people I agree with the most, or I tend to align with the most in beliefs. I'll say it that way. And the bottom is the people I align with the least. So top is Ben Shapiro. Me and him agree on a lot of
He's
stuff.
mid for me. He's like in mid-range.
Fascinating.
Mid-range.
So he's top for me, and then after him would be Matthew. Sorry, I do this every time.
What?
No, sorry, not Matthew. I'm Michael.
Oh, okay.
Michael
okay.
Knowles. Goodness, I do
See,
that.
he's on the bottom of my list.
That's
I disagree
funny.
with him the most out of all of them.
That's funny. Oh, you know what? Actually,
But I enjoy his show the most because
Clavin is probably above Michael.
Okay.
So Clavin's probably here. You know what though? Hold on. I don't
There's
know.
only one thing I disagree with Clavin. That's the thing.
What is it?
It's his view of
I'm gonna add a second
homosexuality.
Oh yeah, I don't think I agree with him on that.
I don't
Doesn't
agree
he have like a
But he has a
family
re-
member that's gay or
Yeah,
something, and so
but
he
he-
has to. He's in the generation where they feel like if you know someone who's gay, you have to kind of like.
No, because to his credit, I think he was actually that way long before he had kids. To his
Gotcha.
credit. So that's basically the only thing I disagree with him on. And the reason I can respect his view because he actually articulates in a way that I can understand why a Christian would follow that train of logic.
Mm-hmm.
So I can respect that point of view, but I don't agree with it, and I think it's wrong.
There's another thing he said, and this one.
But I've agreed with basically everything else he said.
I don't know if this hints at a core issue that he thinks that I would disagree with him on.
Actually, hold on. We're getting back to what I said earlier, where we can have a political discussion and get down to the values and figure out where we disagree on the values.
Yeah.
Bringing it back full circle, people.
Yes,
All right. So
there
what's
you
your
go.
because we're about to close up, so it's a
Yes.
perfect time to bring it back full circle. So what is the value thing that you think you?
Well, I don't know if this hints at a core value, but it might. A while back, he was in an interview and he was saying that basically he said something along the lines of, on the battlefield, there could never ever be a woman that would beat any man ever on the battlefield.
Okay.
Hold on. He doubled down on it later.
Yeah.
I don't know the.
But he added a little caveat,
Did he?
which
Okay.
is
I missed the
I'm
caveat.
obvious. He basically said, barring a Joan of Arc type situation, or barring extremely extraneous circumstances.
Okay, so he did address Joan of Arc. I still 100% disagree.
But Joan of Arc was anointed.
Sure,
That's the
we'll just
exception.
ignore Joan of Arc.
No, his point in basically
wrong.
saying female swordsman versus male swordsman.
Wait, swordsman or battlefield? Swords were not used on the battlefield.
What?
Swords were not a battlefield weapon. They were a self-defense weapon. 100%. On the battlefield, you use spears and polearms. You might use great swords, which are basically just a sword-shaped polearm.
Okay.
But on the battlefield, you only use the sword if you lost your other weapons.
I say sword. What?
No, there's a difference. There's
I'm
a big
saying
difference.
okay. What I'm trying to get at is medieval combat.
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you're in medieval combat,
On the battlefield or or like one-on-one? Big difference.
Both, I'd say.
Okay, I'm going to separate them into two categories. We'll talk about battlefield
Okay.
first.
On the battlefield.
I am a medieval enthusiast, by the way. I love fighting stuff. I also have fenced for a long time. So
on the battlefield, if a woman is to hope to beat men on the battlefield, she either needs to be anointed, or super lucky, or have such a good strategic mindset that she is able to overcome her very significant disadvantages.
What battlefield are you imagining? Just so I'm on
a medieval battlefield.
So guys,
phalanxes
or phalanxes are pre-medieval, but I get your point. Medieval formations of people marching together, doing some spear fencing, and then maybe charging and clashing together. Okay, 100% disagree. There are two things that matter on the battlefield, and only two. The first one is, will you stay in formation? Because if you turn and run, that's when the battle starts to go. The second thing is, will you actually do your part in the formation, which is basically just, will you stay in formation? Other than that, there's very little else that matters. You could literally have a paraplegic guy who can hold a spear whose neck is super strong, and he can hold the spear and aim it with his teeth, and it would still be an effective member.
I don't believe that statement, but
I'm exaggerating with the paraplegic.
I know you're exaggerating a little bit, but if your argument is you could have a woman who's half the size. Okay, you could have his name? Chris Rogers, is that what Captain America's name is?
Oh yeah.
Okay, pre-steroids Captain America. If you put him on the battlefield, are you saying
medieval battlefield?
Are you saying? Fine. Okay, I can respect that point of view.
He'd have only a very slightly smaller percentage chance of surviving the battle than anyone else.
I respect that point of view. I don't know that I believe that.
You're objectively incorrect. No, the way it shows that you do not understand the way medieval battlefields work. One-on-one duel, totally different.
Okay.
You would lose.
I recognize the possibility that
I can explain it to you.
Well, I recognize the possibility that you. At this point, we don't have time.
I'm passionate about this.
I know.
One.
Otherwise, we get into it
next time.
I recognize the possibility that you could be right. I'm not 100% convinced, but I recognize the possibility you could be right. If that's the case, then, so for example, going back to the fact that I tend to agree with this guy Andrew Klavan more, if he were to accept that premise that pre-steroids Captain America could survive, I think he'd also agree that the woman could survive.
I don't know if he would, and that's where I was talking about. I don't know. I think that's the underlying core
because I've actually read his books, so I actually
you would know him.
I have a pretty robust view of his worldview.
What I'm saying is, I don't know if the underlying core issue. There's this mentality that a lot of people have, and we will wrap up. But there's a mentality a lot of men particularly have that women are objectively always, without fail, weaker than men. That women are weaker than men. Period. End of sentence. It is not that. There is nuance. There are lots of women who could beat the snot out of 98% of men on the planet. There are a lot of
Andrew Klavan specifically has said before that Gina Carano could beat the crap out of him. No question.
Okay, good. Does he know there's hundreds of Gina Caranos?
Probably hundreds. I don't know if I'd say thousands.
There's an entire league of MMA.
Yeah.
And stuff.
The female MMA fighters could destroy me.
There are women in MMA.
No serious person.
Karate, Taekwondo. All of them can beat the crap out of Andrew Klavan.
No serious person is going to contest that, and I don't think he would either. I feel pretty confident because again, I've read his books. I actually know.
In that case, his words do not line up with what he believes because he said he did a very blanket statement and was like, there are extreme outliers.
This is the problem with commentary. This is a problem people run to in the commentary.
You can abstract this to run away from me. No. Right, if you want.
No, because I think you're probably right.
It's a problem with commentary, and I suspect I could convince Andrew Klavan in person if I was given the chance.
The problem with commentary is you make broad statements.
I see. Okay, here's my thing. Sorry, one last thing, and then we can go. This is a passion point of mine. If in terms of strength and endurance, the difference between a typical man and a typical woman on the medieval battlefield is almost completely inconsequential because the difference between two men is almost completely inconsequential.
If your that is true,
let me give you examples.
Fine.
How hard you hit someone with a spear does not matter. It is going to kill them. How long you can hold the spear does not matter. You rotate out every 5 minutes or something like that. 2 minutes. You rotate the lines. That's why there are multiple lines. People back up and then other people come forward.
I'll stop this because if everything you're saying is true, I agree with you. Here is. Maybe people don't do a good job articulating this point of view very well.
There's something else I was going to add that actually you might be surprised about. But
I will grant the fact that maybe, in the commentary business, you typically talk in superlative and then walk your way backwards from that.
Sure.
That happens. Okay. Here's what any serious person is going to believe on this topic. Because this is the way anyone will articulate it.
Comment below if you're serious.
Yeah. This is the way people will articulate it. if they're actually sitting down for the purpose of articulating this principle. And I've heard this numerous times from numerous people who will then also use superlatives later on. But when they actually sit down to discuss it, this is what they say. They will say, men start here, women start here. Women can work their way up to here. Women can work their way up to here. But if a man invests the same amount of time and effort, he's going to be way up here.
At elite levels, 100%.
Men have an advantage where they basically, if you're
It's
running
called testosterone.
yes, if you're running a race, you can think of the male advantage as he starts 150 meters ahead of you. Now, if you're really, really fast and he's kind of a clunker, you can close that distance.
See, I don't actually agree with this framing of it. I would personally frame it more as women and men kind of start here and here, and if they both work the same amount, the increase for a guy goes from here to here, and from a girl goes here to here.
No, that's maybe a better way to put it.
Guys, I think, do generally have a bit of a physical advantage without doing any work, for the simple fact that we have more testosterone and we tend to be
faster
larger.
muscle fibers, and we tend to be larger, and our bones are denser, and all the
so
down
if
the
you
list.
if you have your just typical man, typical
I'm
woman,
a
the guy
fat
will
guy,
generally work.
and I can beat almost every woman I know in an arm wrestle.
You couldn't beat my wife.
Maybe.
I have watched her destroy men in arm wrestling.
Okay, but
I don't think I could beat her.
But she's
actually.
not an average woman.
No,
she's
she's not.
more
She's a
athletic.
gymnast.
Yeah, she's a
There's
lot
a
more
lot of
athletic.
gymnasts.
Oh, I'm not saying that. There's plenty of women
And
like
are
her.
we excluding extremes? Because if so, we're also excluding obese people.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There's plenty of people like her
Yeah.
who could take on people like me.
And that's my point.
My
Is the generalization is too broad and loses accuracy.
but I think it's more broad than you think it is. I think that yes, there is some nuance, sure, but I think for example, one of the perfect examples of the athletic difference between men and women is when Serena Williams and her sister challenged any man outside of the top
This is
200
irrelevant to
tennis
what we're
players.
talking about because we said get rid of outliers. Serena Williams is one of the best of all time in tennis.
But she played some guy who wasn't the best.
I know he was
of all
like
time.
number 400. He was still a competitive tennis player in the top 400 of the world.
Yes.
We are comparing elite men to elite women, and in physical things, elite men will beat elite women every time by a mile, probably a lot of miles.
Yeah.
Except there is one exception, and that exception is extremely long. There's like a super marathon thing that's like 72 miles. More women than men have completed it.
I don't know anything about that. So
Yeah, a friend of mine who runs marathons was telling me about it. But that's super, super endurance. Anyway, we need to wrap up. Maybe next time, maybe the next episode will be Battle of the Sexes, and we can argue about men versus women. And
maybe because the reality
that's
is
really interesting
on averages though, like your wife is not an average woman.
No.
I am largely an average man. Your wife could beat me at tons of different athletic endeavors. Tons, probably all of them.
Yeah, pretty much.
Except for maybe grappling. I could probably take her in that. Because
I don't think you could.
just the weight differential is
You'd be
significant.
surprised. It depends.
The weight
Anyway,
is such a big thing.
we can talk about that next time.
But the reality is, I can beat virtually any average woman. Because
I think
I'm
a lot
average
of men
man.
overestimate their ability to do that. I really believe
I think
that.
the statistics show that. I think if you actually look at data,
You're only
it
looking
shows
the
that.
data only compares elite men and elite women.
maybe you're right. It would be an interesting conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Either way, to wrap that up, the values difference on that is
I think
we both agree.
I think women are more competent than I think he does. That's what I think.
I don't think. I think there's an overall view that women feel that if they can't be competent at the as competent as men at the physical activities, that it somehow lessens them. And I think
don't
that's
think that at all.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
and I know
that's
you don't think
ridiculous.
that.
And I don't think Andrew Clavin thinks that either.
No, he does.
But I don't think that women are incompetent in physical things.
No,
Not in and like,
I don't think they're incompetent. I just don't think they're as competent as men by default.
I think they have less physical
By
potential.
default. I'm saying the default. You can edit the default. But
Yeah.
I think the default is that men are going to be more competent.
And I think we'll leave it there for today.
Yeah, so that started out in theology and really derailed into politics
That's
and
the
culture.
point of this. We brabble.
Yeah, we brabble. I might call this episode Theology and Politics or Theology and Culture.
Theologitics.
You know what? I'm going to call it Theologitics. Okay, thank you for listening. I apologize for the lighting. The lighting got
I
way
know.
worse as time goes on.
It's fine.
This is a one-man operation. This is how things go.
Man, thank you very much. There are two of us.
That was... The phrase
Rude.
one-man operation is a phrase. Two-man operation is not. That was not to exclude Reagan. Yes, this is a two-man operation. You know, It's low budget, but I hope the conversation makes up for it. And I hope you tune in next
I'm
week.
not going to apologize for any of the content. I think it's great.
Good.
I hope you enjoyed it.
You know what? I'm not going to apologize either. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. We will see you next month on The World from Grandma's Attic.